In the shadowy world of after-hours clubs and underground strip joints, dark secrets lurk behind velvet curtains and neon lights. These chilling stories pull back the curtain on a nightlife filled with illicit substances, sudden violence, and unexplained deaths. From shocking shootings to mysterious accidents that left investigators baffled, these real-life nightmares expose the terrifying consequences of a world built on temptation and danger. Join us as we uncover the 5 most disturbing deaths that happened inside the walls of strip clubs.
At the height of the Cold War, 2 superpowers would vie to put their man on the moon. Yet before one small step for man, one giant leap in spaceflight would have to come first.
It was April 22nd, 1967. The pale dawn light spread across the Baikonur Cosmodrome as Vladimir Komarov, husband, father, and national hero, walked slowly toward the launch pad of Soyuz 1. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. He knew this might be his last walk. Behind the proud smiles and patriotic speeches, he carried a terrible secret. The spacecraft he was about to pilot was fatally flawed. Komarov, 40 years old, was already a Soviet icon, a test pilot and cosmonaut who had flown on Voskhod 1, the first mission to carry more than one human into space. But this flight was different. He wasn't chasing glory. He was walking into a machine he knew could kill him. His closest friend, Yuri Gagarin, had begged the Kremlin to cancel the launch. Engineers had found over 200 major defects: faulty parachutes, unstable controls, unreliable sensors, and a heat shield that might rip off during re-entry. The warnings were ignored. The launch was politically timed for Lenin's birthday and May Day celebrations. Komarov faced an impossible choice. If he refused, Gagarin, his backup, would have to fly. He couldn't let his friend die in a doomed spacecraft, so he accepted the mission in silence, smiling for cameras as he stepped into Soyuz 1, knowing it was a coffin. At 3:35 a.m., the rocket roared to life. Within minutes, disaster struck. One of the 2 solar panels failed to deploy, crippling power and control. Komarov fought to stabilize the tumbling ship, burning precious fuel as ground control scrambled to save him. The planned launch of Soyuz 2 was canceled immediately. For 18 orbits, Komarov battled the failing spacecraft. His calm voice masked the chaos. Conditions are poor. Eventually, Mission Control ordered an emergency return. The capsule entered Earth's atmosphere engulfed in fire. The heat shield held, but the parachutes did not. The main chute failed to open, and the backup tangled with it. There would be no slowing down. Soviet listening posts recorded Komarov's final words filled with rage and despair as he cursed the officials who had sent him to his death. At 7:24 a.m., Soyuz 1 slammed into the steppe near Orenburg at over 250 mm, flattening on impact and erupting into flames. His remains fused with the wreckage unrecognizable, beyond recovery. Komarov became the first human to die during spaceflight. The Soviet Union hid the truth, but among his fellow cosmonauts, outrage spread. Gagarin and others demanded accountability for a tragedy caused not by space itself, but by politics and pride. Soyuz flights were grounded for 18 months, and hundreds of flaws were corrected, the same ones Komarov had warned about. His sacrifice forced a reckoning within the Soviet space program. Vladimir Komarov didn't die because space is dangerous. He died because politics made it deadly. His final flight remains a haunting reminder of courage, friendship, and the deadly price of ambition.
Friends and family are mourning the death of a 22-year-old woman who died on the job late last week. Lauren Block worked at Christie's Cabaret in Cleveland and fell 15 feet while working.
January 2nd, 2013. Just another cold winter night in Cleveland. For 22-year-old Lauren Block, it was supposed to be a normal shift at Christie's Cabaret, a place she knew well, a job she'd done countless times. She showed up like she always did, likely wearing that familiar smile. Those who knew Lauren say she had a way of lighting up a room, even one filled with shadows. She was young, full of life, with long black hair and a future still unwritten. But what happened in the early hours of that morning turned routine into horror. Lauren was upstairs in the club with a customer named Pasquale Sterino. It was a private dance, a lap dance, nothing out of the ordinary for a place like Christie's. Then, in a moment that no one saw coming, Lauren attempted a high-risk move. She grabbed a railing, possibly trying to pull off a jump or flip, something to impress, something different. But something went terribly wrong. In a split second, she lost her grip, and then she was falling. Head first, over the balcony railing. The drop was 15 feet, straight to the hard floor below. The sound must have echoed through the club like a gunshot. When first responders arrived, they found Lauren broken and unconscious, bleeding heavily. Her injuries were catastrophic. She was rushed to Metro Health Medical Center, clinging to life. As news spread, questions flooded in. One witness claimed he saw 2 men flee the scene, but who they were or why they ran remains a mystery. Surveillance footage gave investigators no reason to treat it as a criminal act. Just a tragic accident, they said. But was it? Why did she fall so far? How did she even manage to go over that railing? Former colleague Danielle Edwards, like many others, was haunted by the impossibility of it all. She'd worked that same floor, worn those same 6-inch heels, and still, she insisted, the railing was high enough. Something didn't add up. OSHA launched an investigation, looking at the balcony's structure, the spacing between furniture and the edge, but no finding could reverse what happened next. For nearly a week, doctors fought to save her. Her family hoped, prayed, but the trauma was too severe. On January 9th, just 7 days after her fall, Lauren Block was pronounced dead. She was 22, and just like that, the light she brought to the world was extinguished. Her family was shattered, friends left in disbelief, but in the midst of their unimaginable pain, they found one small piece of grace. Lauren had been an organ donor. In death, she would save lives. Strangers would carry a part of her forward, a final act of kindness from someone who lived to uplift others. Christie's Cabaret gave no statement, no apology, no explanation, only silence.
The man who took the lives of 3 young siblings and their grandfather while drunk behind the wheel has been granted full parole.
It was September 27, 2015 in Vaughan, Ontario. The Neville Lake family was on a simple outing in their minivan. Inside sat 6 people: 65-year-old Gary Neville, his wife Nerissa, her mother Josefina Frias, and 3 bright young children. Daniel, just 9 years old, Harrison, 5, and little Millie, only 2. At the very same time, 29-year-old Marco Muzzo was returning from his bachelor party in Miami. He had been drinking heavily for days, even continuing on his private jet back to Toronto. He knew he wasn't sober, but still, he climbed into his black Jeep Cherokee after landing at Pearson International Airport. Later, he would admit he thought he could take a chance. That single, reckless decision would shatter lives forever. Around 4 p.m., Vaughan Fire and Rescue received the call. 2 vehicles, completely wrecked, at the intersection of Kirby Road and Kipling Avenue. Muzzo had blown through a stop sign, barreling at 85 kilometers per hour, about 53 miles an hour, through a quiet residential intersection. His Jeep slammed into the driver's side of the family's minivan in a violent T-bone collision. The impact was so devastating that over 30 first responders rushed to the scene, fighting desperately to save those inside. 4 were resuscitated at once, but it was too late. 9-year-old Daniel was killed instantly. Harrison and Millie were declared brain dead, passing away shortly after in the hospital. Their grandfather Gary didn't make it either. Nerissa and Josefina survived, but their bodies carried the scars. Their souls carried even more. Witnesses at the scene watched in disgust as Muzzo stumbled around, unable to stand, his body reeking of alcohol, his bladder uncontrollably released. Later, tests showed his blood alcohol level was almost 3 times the legal limit. He was arrested on the spot. That night, news stations flashed images of the mangled van across Canadian screens. Jennifer Neville Lake, the children's mother, recognized it immediately. She was taken to the hospital, where she identified the lifeless bodies of her children and her father. In one afternoon, she lost her entire world. The country erupted in shock and outrage. How could someone with a record of reckless behavior 10 past speeding violations, and even a prior arrest for public intoxication, still be on the road. In February 2016, Muzo pleaded guilty to 4 counts of impaired driving causing death and 2 counts of causing bodily harm. By March, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison and handed a 12-year driving ban. It was the harshest sentence in Canadian history for a first-time impaired driving conviction. But for Jennifer, and for the millions watching, no sentence could ever measure up to the lives stolen that day. Muzo's time behind bars was cushioned in a minimum security facility. He applied for parole in 2018 but was denied. By 2020, he was granted day parole. By 2021, he walked free, serving less than half of his sentence. His release carried restrictions, but to many, it felt like justice had barely been served. For Jennifer, the toll only deepened. She revealed that at the time of the crash, she had been pregnant, but the trauma led to a miscarriage. Her husband, Edward Lake, fell into an abyss of despair. He often described his existence as living in a nightmare, consumed by grief he could not escape. On June 20th, 2022, just one day after Father's Day, Edward was found dead at the age of 49. Jennifer shared a heartbreaking message. "My children's father, Edward Lake, has joined our kids so they can play together forever." Her pain turned into purpose. Jennifer started a nonprofit called Many Hands Doing Good to support children living with trauma. Yet every year, she still visits her children's graves, placing their untouched lunchboxes there, writing what grade they should be in, reminding the world of the futures that were stolen. Even after Muzo's release, petitions spread across the country, calling for his wealthy family's name to be stripped from buildings they had funded. But hospitals and institutions refused, including Sick Kids Hospital, the very place where 2 of her children had been pronounced dead. Muzo himself issued a statement in 2020 saying, "I was careless and irresponsible. I will live with this for the rest of my life." But those words, hollow to many, could never balance the scales of justice.
Tonight, a community is grieving. A popular family travel influencer died after being involved in a car accident in Mexico.
It was March 6th, 2025, a day meant for sunshine and celebration. Elise Caffey, a fearless family travel influencer from Utah, had just arrived in Cancun, Mexico with her husband Dan. They weren't filming or sharing content. They were simply guests at a wedding, taking a rare moment to be just a couple. No kids, no cameras. Elise, known online as 3 Kids Travel, had inspired thousands by proving that family life didn't mean sacrificing adventure. But this time, the adventure would end in tragedy. They were in a hired vehicle, cruising through the city. Then, without warning, a truck carrying hot asphalt lost control. In seconds, a 10-car pileup exploded into chaos. Their car was hit the hardest. It flipped violently and landed in the worst possible position. And then came the asphalt. Boiling black liquid poured into the wreck. Elise was trapped underneath, burned by the scorching flood. The crash had happened just outside a hospital, but even being steps away from help couldn't stop what was unfolding. The heat was so intense, medical workers struggled to reach her. Dan survived without injury. Their driver, Luis, died at the scene. Elise clung to life as paramedics worked quickly to stabilize her. She was rushed into care, sedated, placed on life support. Her face remained untouched, a small mercy. Back home, her family began updating Elise's followers. The tone was desperate but hopeful. Posts spoke of severe burns, and prayers poured in from around the world. 2 days later, Elise was flown to Salt Lake City and admitted to the University of Utah's burn unit. Doctors did everything they could. Multiple surgeries, round-the-clock care, but her condition remained critical. Her daughters visited her bedside, gently brushing and braiding her hair. Dan never left her side, playing guitar softly, singing through tears, hoping she could hear him. But time was slipping away. On March 12th, 6 days after the accident, her family shared the heartbreaking news. Elise had passed. She held on for as long as she could and fought so hard, they wrote. The post was filled with sorrow, but also gratitude that she made it home, that she said goodbye, that everything possible had been done. They ended with hope. We believe in eternal families and know we'll see her again. But the heartbreak didn't end there. Luis, the driver who lost his life, left behind a wife and 2 teenage daughters. Elise's family launched a GoFundMe in his honor. Over $64,000 was raised, not out of obligation, but because Elise had cultivated a community that cared. She had always said families should chase joy. That life was for living, not waiting. Her photos captured that spirit. Barefoot on beaches, snacks in hand, children clinging to her legs, adventure always close behind. She never claimed it was easy. She just believed it was worth it. And now, she's gone.
A father is outraged after his daughter was billed for a guardrail that he says contributed to her death. Hannah Eimers died in a car crash last November in Tennessee.
It was November 1st, 2016, in McMinn County, Tennessee. 17-year-old Hannah Eimers was heading home after a Halloween night spent with friends. She and her friend were driving north on Interstate 75, the quiet hum of the road beneath them. But in an instant, everything changed. The car veered off the road. No one knows why. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe a brief distraction. Hannah tried to correct the wheel, but the vehicle swerved violently toward the median, straight into a guardrail. But this wasn't just any guardrail. This was a Lindsay X-Lite, a design meant to save lives. A device meant to crumple on impact, to absorb the force, to slow the vehicle and protect its passengers. But that morning it didn't. Instead of collapsing, the rail acted like a spear. The steel sliced through the front of the car, punched through the driver's side, and kept going, through Hannah's head and chest, until it shoved her into the back seat. The car dragged the metal monster for nearly 20 feet before it finally stopped. Hannah died instantly. She never had a chance. Beside her, her friend sat in stunned silence, surviving with nothing more than a minor cut. Hannah wasn't just another teenager. She was the oldest of 10 in a blended family, a brilliant girl who had earned her high school diploma at 15. She was fluent in multiple languages, gifted in music and acting, and passionate about working with children with special needs. She'd even learned sign language so she could connect with them more deeply. And just like that, she was gone. Her father, Steve Eimers, an EMT who had seen more crashes than he could count, couldn't believe what had happened. A crash that should have been survivable turned into a nightmare. How could the friend walk away with a scratch while Hannah didn't? That question haunted him. But what came next made it worse. 4 months later, a letter arrived, addressed to Hannah from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. Inside was a bill for nearly $3,000, a charge for replacing the very guardrail that had killed her. Steve was stunned. How could they? They will take your life and then send you a bill, he said bitterly. But the deeper Steve dug, the more horrifying the truth became. Just a week before Hannah's crash, Tennessee had quietly removed the X-Lite from its list of approved safety devices. They knew something was wrong. They knew these guardrails weren't safe at highway speeds, but over 1,000 of them still lined the state's roads, including the one that killed his daughter. Steve's search for answers uncovered even more disturbing facts. At least 19 people across the U.S. had died in crashes involving X-Lites. Time and again, the rails hadn't collapsed like they were supposed to. They hadn't saved lives. They had become deadly weapons. Grief turned Steve into a man on a mission. He traveled over 20,000 miles inspecting X-Lite installations in more than 15 states. What he found horrified him. Damaged rails left unrepaired, rails installed incorrectly, rails that were accidents waiting to happen. In North Carolina alone, he checked over 200 of them, and nearly every single one had serious issues. Some states took action. Tennessee began pulling X-Lites from roads with speed limits over 45 miles per hour. But in other places, like North Carolina, more than 3,500 remained. Officials said it would cost over $20 million to replace them all. Meanwhile, lives hung in the balance. And there was another dark truth. The government had relied on private labs to test these guardrails, labs owned by the very companies that made them. The X-Lite was tested and approved by a lab belonging to its own manufacturer. A 2016 federal report called this what it was, a dangerous conflict of interest. It took years, but Steve's relentless advocacy helped change that. A new rule in the 2021 infrastructure bill now demands independent testing of highway safety equipment. But for Steve, and for families like his, it came far too late. It was November 27th, 2024, in Phoenix, Arizona, a place where the desert sun usually glows against the palm trees of the Arizona Biltmore Resort, a hotel with a reputation for luxury, history, and glamour. Presidents had walked its halls, celebrities lounged by its pools, families came here to create memories. But on that morning, one family's dream vacation turned into a nightmare no one could have imagined. 8-year-old Luke William Lynette had come with his family. full of energy and excitement. A boy from Waukee, Iowa, he wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was the kind of kid teachers remembered, teammates loved, and neighbors cherished. His classmates said he always made sure no one felt left out. Coaches recalled his playful spirit, joking and smiling even when the game got tough. At home, he filled the neighborhood with laughter, basketballs bouncing, music playing, and the kind of joy only a child can bring. He was just 8 years old, but already Luke had built a reputation for kindness and light. And then, without warning, everything changed. The Biltmore grounds are famous for their art and architecture, adorned with towering concrete figures called the Solemn Sprites. 6 feet tall, each one weighed hundreds of pounds, created in 1914 as symbols of mythical guardians. For decades, they had stood silently, admired as pieces of history. But one statue, on that day, did not stay standing. In an instant, it toppled, crashing down with brutal force. The sound shattered the morning calm. Witnesses gasped. Screams broke out. The massive figure fell directly onto little Luke. Chaos erupted. Guests scrambled. Resort staff rushed in panic. The once quiet grounds became a scene of horror. When firefighters from Phoenix Fire Department arrived, led by Captain Todd Keller, they found Luke gravely injured. The statue lay broken in pieces beside him, but the real damage had already been done. Luke had suffered a devastating head injury. Crews worked frantically, carefully lifting, stabilizing, and rushing him to Phoenix Children's Hospital. Doctors fought to save him, placing him on life support. But by the next day, Thanksgiving morning, Luke's fight was over. Surrounded by his family, his bright young life was cut short. The loss hit harder than anyone could have prepared for. Phoenix was shaken, but so too was Waukee, Iowa, his hometown hundreds of miles away. Teachers, classmates, neighbors, all devastated. At Walnut Hills Elementary, grief counselors were brought in to help children who couldn't understand why their friend would never return to the playground. His obituary painted the picture of a boy who loved sports, who loved music, who loved people, and who made everyone laugh. He was a protector of others, even at 8 years old. The tragedy left behind aching questions. How could a statue that had stood for decades suddenly fall? Why that moment? Why that child? Phoenix police ruled out foul play, calling it a tragic accident. Surveillance footage was reviewed. Resort staff were questioned. The Arizona Biltmore issued a statement calling guest safety their top priority, expressing sorrow and asking for privacy. The Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, whose architecture had inspired the resort, called the event heartbreaking. And yet, for all the words and statements, the answers never came. The image still lingers, one statue standing tall, untouched, while beside it, another lay shattered on the ground. A symbol once meant to protect had instead taken away what was irreplaceable. On December 6th, friends and family gathered at the Lutheran Church of Hope in Walka to say goodbye. Luke's family asked that donations be made to a memorial fund in his name to support youth sports in Des Moines. It was a way to honor him, to keep his spirit alive in the games he loved so much. Luke William Lynette was born on January 29, 2016. He died on November 28, 2024. His father had passed before him, and now his mother, siblings, and grandparents carry the weight of his absence. What happened that morning at the Biltmore was sudden, senseless, and cruel. A vacation meant for joy turned into a story of heartbreak. And though officials may never know why the statue fell, one thing remains clear. Luke's light, though extinguished far too soon, left an imprint on everyone who knew him, stretching across 2 states, 2 communities, and countless broken hearts. He was just 18, and for most people his age, life is still beginning, full of hopes, choices, and bright, ambitious plans. But for Nguyen Minh Triet, a rising star in Vietnamese gymnastics, that future was stolen in a split second. On what should have been just another training day, Triet attempted a backflip. Not his first, not his last. At least that's what everyone assumed. But as he launched himself into the air and rotated through space like he had countless times before, something went horribly wrong. He landed directly on his head. The impact was catastrophic, and his arms and legs immediately stopped responding. Paralyzed from the neck down, Triet was rushed to Hanoi's E Hospital. Doctors performed emergency surgery, then transferred him to Bach Mai Hospital to begin what would become a long and heartbreaking battle for survival. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe on his own, and yet he wanted to live. "I really appreciate life. I want to keep living," he whispered after his second surgery, words that would haunt those around him. His coach, Major Hao Trung Lin, broke down recalling them. "It made me so emotional. He still had the will to fight, but willpower alone couldn't undo the damage." Despite round-the-clock care, Triet's condition worsened. In April, he was transferred to Thon Nan Hospital, where he spent his final weeks surrounded by doctors, nurses, and a devastated family who never gave up hope. On May 9, 2024, Nguyen Minh Triet quietly passed away. The silence that followed was deafening. He had been more than just a gymnast. He had been the heart of his family. The third of 4 siblings, yet the one holding everything together. His father, retired and working odd security jobs. His mother, battling cancer. His older brother, too sick to work. His youngest sister, only 5. Every month, Triet gave up his entire salary from training to help support them. A child should never have to carry that kind of weight, and yet he did it without complaint. His coaches described him as relentless, someone who trained harder than anyone else. Not for fame, but for the dream of one day representing Vietnam on the world stage. He'd started gymnastics at just 7 years old and worked his way into the national youth team by age 12. By the time he was 15, he had already swept national titles in the U12, U13, U14, and U15 categories. In 2022, he even brought home a bronze medal for the Army team at Vietnam's 9th National Sports Festival. And he wasn't done. He had plans. He was determined to age out of the youth ranks and fight for a spot on the senior national team. He was also weeks away from graduating high school. But all of that ended in a foam pit that was supposed to catch him. On November 10, 2023, at the National Sports Training Center in Hanoi, while attempting 2 backflips, Triet fell into that pit. Only instead of bouncing back, his neck snapped under the weight of a miscalculated landing. It should have been safe. That's what everyone thought. But gymnastics doesn't always forgive. In the months that followed, as his body deteriorated and his family watched helplessly, Vietnam's sports community rallied. Donations were raised. The Vietnam Gymnastics Federation and Department of Sports made sure Triet had the best care possible. But no amount of support could undo what had been done. When Triet passed, his coach admitted that somewhere deep down, they had already prepared for this. "We knew the chances were slim, but it doesn't hurt any less," he said, voice cracking. He always fought harder in competition than he did in practice. That spirit, it never left him. More than 200 people gathered for Triet's funeral, because Triet's story isn't just about sport, it's about sacrifice. It was February 22, 2025, in the quiet coastal town of San Pedro, Belize. The sun rose over the Royal Cajal Beach Resort, a luxury escape known for its white sands, turquoise waters. Kawar Nakad, 23, Imani Mala, 24, Wafi Elar, 26. They had come from Massachusetts to soak in the sun, celebrate life, and make memories together. Friends back home described them as kind, ambitious, full of laughter and light. Their flight home was scheduled for the next day. Their bags were packed, but something went terribly wrong. On the morning of February 21st, hotel staff noticed something strange. None of the women had been seen since the day before. Surveillance confirmed they had entered their suite and never left. Housekeeping knocked. No answer. The next morning, still nothing. When the staff finally entered the room, they found all 3 women unresponsive. The room was still. No signs of violence. No struggle. Just 3 vibrant lives gone. First responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. The women were pronounced dead at the scene. A vacation that began in celebration had ended in an inexplicable tragedy. The news stunned everyone. Belize police launched an investigation. Commissioner Chester Williams gave a public statement mentioning that alcohol, vape pens, and gummies had been found in the room, but nothing illegal. He speculated that the women may have consumed something toxic. That explanation didn't sit right with their families. They knew these women. That theory didn't fit. An initial autopsy in Belize listed the cause of death as acute pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs. But why? How? There were no answers. Their bodies were flown back to Massachusetts for a second autopsy as the families pushed for clarity. Weeks later, a strange twist emerged. A woman using the alias Jane had checked into the Royal Cajal on March 1st, unaware of what had happened just days before. Concerned for her safety, she called ahead. A hotel staff member named Daniel reassured her. The deaths, he said, were an isolated incident. She believed him. But on the 5th day of her stay, Jane woke up dizzy with a numb leg and blurred vision. When she stood, she collapsed. For nearly 40 minutes, she couldn't move. Back home, the symptoms lingered. Headaches, confusion, vision loss. She didn't know what had happened until she started reading about carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a silent killer, odorless, invisible. It can leak from fuel-powered appliances and builds up fast in enclosed spaces. The symptoms matched. Jane reported her experience to the U.S. Embassy. A friend later told her that some rooms at the Royal Cajal had tested for dangerously high carbon monoxide levels, but the embassy stayed quiet. Then came another voice. A guest named Nana H. had stayed at the resort just before the women were found. Her personal carbon monoxide detector had gone off, over 400 parts per million, an extremely dangerous level. She reported it to hotel staff, their response confused and unprepared. Under mounting pressure, Belizean officials ran environmental tests. This time they found some rooms with readings as high as 500 parts per million, more than 10 times the maximum safe level. The danger had been real, and it had been there all along. On March 26th, the truth was confirmed. Kawar, Imani, and Wafi had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Toxicology reports showed their blood carried over 60% carboxyhemoglobin, a fatal level. No other substances were found. The initial speculation, the assumptions, the dismissals, it had all been wrong. Their families released a joint statement filled with heartbreak and fury. How, they asked, could such a basic safety failure claim 3 young lives? How could no one have noticed? How could it take a second tragedy, nearly, for the truth to surface? The Royal Cahal Beach Resort quietly shut its doors, but the silence that killed those women still echoes. It wasn't a freak accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was preventable, and it was missed by people who should have known better. It was July 19th, 2025, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. A single piece of news swept through the kingdom like wildfire. Prince Al-Walid bin Khaled bin Talal Saud, known across the world as the Sleeping Prince, had passed away. He was only 36 years old. For 2 decades, his life had been frozen in time, suspended between hope and heartbreak, as millions quietly followed his story. Families whispered his name in prayers, strangers held on to the thought of a miracle, and his father refused to let go. But after 20 years in a hospital bed, that fragile chapter finally came to an end. To understand the weight of this moment, we need to go back to where it all began. Prince Al-Walid was born on April 18, 1989, into one of the most powerful families in Saudi Arabia. His father, Prince Khaled bin Talal, was a respected royal. His uncle, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, was a billionaire known worldwide. His grandfather, Prince Talal, was one of the sons of King Abdulaziz, the very founder of modern Saudi Arabia. Al-Walid's future was written in power and responsibility. From a young age, he was raised with discipline, honor, and the expectation of greatness. By the age of 15, he was already training at a prestigious military academy in London, preparing for a future that seemed unstoppable. And then, in an instant, it was all taken away. In 2005, while in the United Kingdom, Al-Walid was in a devastating car crash. The impact left him with catastrophic brain injuries and severe internal damage. London doctors fought to stabilize him, but the truth was grim. He was flown back to Riyadh and admitted to King Abdulaziz Medical City. There, his body lived, but his eyes never opened again. Machines kept him alive. A ventilator breathed for him. A feeding tube nourished him. And from that day on, the prince who was once so full of promise was locked away in silence. Doctors had little hope. Many said recovery was impossible. In 2015, 10 years into his coma, the medical team even urged his father to consider ending life support. But Prince Khaled would not hear of it. He stayed by his son's side every single day, gripping his hand, whispering prayers, and believing that one day his son would return. He shared photos of himself holding Al-Walid's hand, decorating the hospital room for Ramadan, Eid, and Saudi National Day. It became less of a hospital ward and more of a shrine of devotion, and the world watched. For years, family, friends, and religious leaders visited Al-Walid. His younger brothers, Saud and Muhammad, spoke to him, updated him on family life, prayed beside him. They clung to hope in the smallest gestures. And then, in 2020, something extraordinary happened. A video surfaced online, showing the prince appearing to move his fingers and even lift his hand when someone called his name. The footage spread like wildfire. People everywhere believed this was the miracle they had been waiting for. Hope surged again. But doctors crushed the dream, saying it was nothing more than reflexes of a body trapped in a vegetative state. Still, the people refused to stop believing. They called him the Sleeping Prince. They shared old videos of him in uniform, young and strong, and they waited for the day he would awaken. But that day never came. On July 19th, 2025, after 20 long years in the same hospital room, Prince Al-Walid slipped away. His father broke the news on X, posting a haunting black and white photo of his son along with a plea for prayers. The next day, funeral prayers were held at Imam Turki bin Abdullah Mosque in Riyadh. The doors were opened to the public, and thousands came to pay their respects. Crowds gathered outside Al Fakhraya Palace, mourning a prince whose story had touched hearts far beyond the kingdom's borders. No official explanation was given. No one knows if his condition had worsened or if, after 2 decades of waiting, the family had finally made the impossible decision to let go. What is known is the impact he left behind. The hashtag #Sleeping Prince trended once more as tributes poured in from around the globe. People remembered not just the tragedy of his youth, but the love that surrounded him for 20 years.
The Industrial Magistrates Court has fined Gymnastics Townsville $70,000 for breaching the Workplace Health and Safety Act. Gymnastics Townsville was last month found guilty of breaches after the death of a 19-year-old gymnast in June last year. Michelle Maitland fell and hit her head on a section of concrete not covered by a safety mat.
June 18, 2009, Townsville, Australia. The night began like any other. 19-year-old Michelle Maitland rushed out the front door for gymnastics training, her voice echoing through the house as she called to her mother, "Are we having that steak when I get home?" She didn't wait for an answer. She never came back. It was the last time her mother would ever hear her voice. Inside the Aitkenvale gym in Townsville, the air was filled with the rhythmic sounds of practice, feet hitting mats, bodies flipping, coaches shouting encouragement. But that night, one mistake, one overlooked detail, would turn a routine training session into a nightmare. Michelle, full of determination, attempted a backward twisting layout, a move so advanced it's usually reserved for elite gymnasts. She launched herself into the air, body spinning, heart racing. For a split second, everything looked perfect. Then the rotation went too far. Instead of landing safely on the padded surface, Michelle came crashing down head first onto bare concrete. A section of the floor that should have been covered by 6 meters of protective matting had been left exposed. There was only half the required padding, and her skull met the unforgiving surface with unimaginable force. Witnesses say the sound of the impact silenced the gym. Coaches and teammates rushed to her side, but the damage was already done. Michelle was rushed to Townsville General Hospital, her condition critical. Her family gathered, clinging to hope, but by the following day, that hope was gone. Michelle was gone. A daughter, a sister, a friend, the bright, laughing girl who only wanted to relive the joy of gymnastics was taken in the most preventable way imaginable. The aftermath was devastating. Investigations revealed her coach wasn't even qualified to teach the move she was attempting. Someone had shifted the mat earlier in the day and failed to put it back. No one checked, no one corrected it, and because of that, Michelle paid with her life. Her mother later admitted the horrifying truth. Her skull was smashed to smithereens. Words no parent should ever have to say. Her death sent shockwaves through Queensland. A safety review of gymnastics clubs across the state revealed chilling findings. Only 8% of facilities had proper controls to prevent hard surface contact. Dozens of enforcement notices were handed out. Many gyms were operating with unqualified coaches, poor safety planning, and equipment that wasn't even set up correctly. Michelle's death was not an isolated freak accident. It was a tragedy waiting to happen. Townsville Gymnastics was eventually fined $70,000 for breaching safety obligations. But for Michelle's family, no fine, no punishment, no report could ever balance the scales. Her mother, Anne, described it as bitter justice. The safety overhaul came too late for her daughter. "I wasn't expecting her not to come home," she said quietly, still struggling to understand how such negligence could cost so much. On what would have been Michelle's 22nd birthday, her family stood outside the same gym, lighting candles in the dark. Each flame a reminder of a young life cut short. Each flicker a warning to parents, athletes, and coaches everywhere. Anne's message was sharp, almost pleading. Don't take the manager's word for it. Check for yourself. Michelle had left gymnastics years earlier, retiring after countless injuries as a child. But she came back, not as an elite competitor, just as a young woman rediscovering a passion. She wasn't training for medals. She wasn't aiming for fame. She just wanted to enjoy the sport she loved. Instead, she became a symbol of everything that can go wrong when safety is ignored. Her story lingers, a chilling reminder that behind the flips and smiles, gymnastics can turn deadly in an instant. And all it takes is one missing mat. He was only 18, but for Nguyen Minh Triet, one of Vietnam's brightest gymnastics prodigies, all of that promise ended in a split second. What should have been just another day at training became the last chapter of a life that had only just begun. It happened during a backflip. He launched himself into the air, body twisting with familiar grace, but the landing was wrong, terribly wrong. His head struck first, His arms and legs stopped responding instantly. Paralysis. He was rushed to Hanoi's E-hospital, then to Bach Mai for emergency surgeries. Machines began doing what his body no longer could, breathing for him, keeping his heart steady. And yet lying there, broken and immobile, he whispered words that cut through every doctor and coach who heard them. "I really appreciate life. I want to keep living." His coach, Major Hao Trung Lin, could barely hold back tears, repeating them. "It made me so emotional. He still had the will to fight," he said. But willpower cannot stitch shattered bones back together. It cannot unbreak a neck. Despite round-the-clock care, Triet's condition slipped further. In April, he was transferred to Thanh Nan Hospital. By then, everyone knew hope was a fragile thing, and yet they clung to it. On May 9th, 2024, that hope finally collapsed into silence. Nguyen Minh Triet was gone. To those who knew him, he had been far more than an athlete. He was the heart of his family, the third of 4 siblings, yet the one holding everything together. His father, retired and piecing together work as a night guard. His mother, sick with cancer. His older brother, too frail to hold a job. And his baby sister, only 5 years old, too young to understand the weight her brother carried. Every month, Triet handed over his entire salary from training, not to buy himself anything, but to keep them afloat. It was a burden no teenager should bear, but he carried it without complaint. And still, he was relentless in the gym. He started gymnastics at 7, joined Vietnam's national youth team by 12, and by 15 he was sweeping national titles year after year. In 2022, he won bronze for the Army team at the 9th National Sports Festival. He was weeks away from finishing high school. He wanted more. Senior competitions, bigger stages, maybe even the Olympics. All of that lay just ahead, until the fall. November 10th, 2023, the National Sports Training Center in Hanoi. Triet attempted 2 backflips into a foam pit, something designed to be safe, but instead of rebounding, his neck snapped under the weight of his landing. A simple miscalculation, and everything changed. In gymnastics, the margin for error is thinner than a blade. In the months that followed, Vietnam's sports community rallied. Donations came in. The Vietnam Gymnastics Federation made sure Triet had the best care possible. Doctors did all they could. His coach admitted that deep down, they knew what the outcome would be. "We knew the chances were slim, but it doesn't hurt any less." He always fought harder in competition than in practice. That spirit, it never left him. When he was laid to rest, more than 200 people gathered. Nguyen Minh Triet's story isn't just about gymnastics, it's about sacrifice. In the early hours of October 15th, 2023, the quiet of Manhattan's Flatiron District was shattered. Screams tore through the night as chaos erupted outside a pole dancing studio. People bolting into the streets, some barefoot, some half-dressed, eyes wide with panic. Inside, the flashing lights still pulsed, music still thumped. But in the dim stairwell near the back, a man lay motionless. Stephen Mington was already gone. He wasn't a stranger to hardship. A Harlem native with a complicated past, Stephen had spent years trying to outrun his own history. Just months earlier, he'd been convicted of federal bank fraud. Before that, there were darker chapters involving drugs and distribution, but those who truly knew him spoke differently. They saw a man clawing his way back to something better, someone with good intentions, trying to rewrite his story even if the ink kept smudging. But his final chapter would unfold in a place that hid more than it showed. By day, Foxy Fitness and Pole Training Studio looked harmless, just another trendy spot in Manhattan offering pole dancing classes, fitness sessions, maybe even some empowerment for women finding confidence in movement. But by night, the lights dimmed, the doors stayed open, and the studio transformed. Behind the shuttered front and soft branding was something far more dangerous. Loud, unlicensed parties, underage drinking, drugs, a parade of blurred faces stumbling through after-hours gatherings that weren't listed on any schedule. Neighbors had been complaining for months. Noise, suspicion. Police had come, issued warnings. Nothing stuck. And then came that night. Details are still hazy. Maybe they always will be. But sometime after midnight, something cracked inside that building. A fight, a whispered threat. A flash of anger in the wrong person's eyes, and then gunfire. One shot. A single bullet tore through the chaos and struck Stephen in the head. He collapsed where the shadows met the strobes, just feet from a glowing stripper pole, the music still pounding, as if the party didn't know someone had just died. Witnesses scattered. Panic exploded. Some shoved their way out the front door. Others disappeared through side exits. No one wanted to stick around. And when the police finally arrived, there was no suspect to question, just silence, sweat, and blood on the floor. Stephen was pronounced dead at the scene. No chance to fight, No time for redemption? And yet, this wasn't some freak accident. This wasn't unforeseeable. Foxy Fitness had been a ticking time bomb for months. Code violations, permit issues, repeated calls to police. And still, nothing had been done. The warning signs were ignored until it was too late. Now the investigation limps forward. No arrests, no answers, just theories. Some say Stephen's past finally caught up with him. That maybe someone from his old life decided that night would be the end. Others believe he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. No motive has been confirmed. And with each passing day, the silence grows heavier. But this story isn't just about Stephen. It's about what happens when rules fade, when oversight disappears, and when dangerous places disguise themselves as something harmless. It's about how easily a night of fun can spiral into a nightmare, how a building meant for fitness and dance became the backdrop for a murder. Stephen Mington had his flaws. He had a past, but he also had a future. And someone stole it from him that night. And the scariest part? The doors to that studio had been open for far too long, and no one had the courage to shut them.
The Condor Club was the first and premier strip club along Broadway Street in San Francisco during the 1960s and 70s.
In November 1983, the Condor Club was the beating heart of San Francisco's infamous nightlife, a symbol of spectacle, rebellion, and raw electricity. Night after night, crowds flocked to see Carol Doda, the city's first topless dancer, descend like a goddess from the ceiling atop a gleaming white piano, lowered gracefully by a custom-built hydraulic lift. It was theater, it was temptation, and it was legend. But one night, after the lights dimmed and the music faded, that same piano became an instrument of horror. James Fazio Ferroso was a fixture at the club. At 40, he wasn't just the assistant manager, he was part of the Condor's soul. A cool, laid-back guy by most accounts, he was as familiar in the club's dim corners as the sound of clinking glasses. That night, he stayed behind with his girlfriend, 23-year-old Teresa Hill, a dancer from another establishment. The club was closed. The stage was theirs. The couple had been drinking, laughing, enjoying the emptiness of the legendary room that just hours earlier had been alive with energy. In the haze of the moment, someone had an idea. Bold, reckless, maybe romantic. They climbed onto the white piano, the same one Carol Doda had turned into legend. What happened next feels like something out of a fever dream. In the midst of their intimacy, one of them accidentally activated the hydraulic lift, the mechanism meant to elevate performers into the spotlight. Only now, it was carrying them not into glory, but into tragedy. The piano began to rise, slowly but unstoppably, powered by electric motors, upward toward the ceiling, toward the narrow gap that led to the dressing rooms above. But this lift wasn't designed for accidents. There were no safeguards, no fail-safes, and no emergency stop. Trapped on top of the piano, neither of them could shut the machine down. As it rose, panic must have set in. Fazio, larger, heavier, was misaligned with the ceiling opening. He didn't fit. Teresa did, but he didn't. The ceiling came closer, then closer still, and then it crushed him. Full weight of the massive piano, combined with his own, slammed James Ferroso into the ceiling with terrifying force. He died almost instantly. Asphyxiation. There was no room to breathe, no space to escape. The music was gone now. All that remained was the mechanical hum of a lift that should never have been touched. Teresa Hill survived, but barely. Pinned beneath Fazio's lifeless body, naked, trapped and alone, she lay motionless in the dark for hours. The silence must have been deafening. She didn't scream, she couldn't move, she just waited, helpless. It wasn't until the janitor arrived early the next morning that the nightmare was discovered. He opened the club expecting nothing more than his usual rounds, only to find a scene so grotesque and surreal it would haunt him forever. Firefighters were called. It took them 3 hours to extract Teresa, carefully removing the body of the man she loved while dealing with the burned-out lift motor and warped machinery. What should have been an unremarkable night became a headline no one could believe. The city was stunned. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was a myth undone. The same piano that had helped turn the Condor Club into a cultural touchstone had become the instrument of death. Whispers began almost immediately. Dancers at the club questioned how it even happened. They insisted the lift was slow, that they could have jumped off, that it didn't make sense. Teresa Hill was left with more than just physical trauma. She now carried the memory of a night that spiraled out of control in the most unimaginable way. A night that started with flirtation, freedom, and a touch of rebellion, and ended in death, pinned between steel and fate. It was November 15th, 1967 morning over the Mojave Desert. On the runway at Edwards Air Force Base, a sleek black aircraft sat beneath the wing of a massive B-52 bomber. Inside its cockpit was 37-year-old Major Michael J. Adams, a test pilot, an engineer, and a man who had spent his life chasing the edge of the impossible. Adams wasn't just another pilot. He was one of the best veterans of the U.S. Air Force, a man being quietly considered for NASA's astronaut corps. He had already flown 6 missions in the legendary X-15, a rocket-powered aircraft built to explore where the atmosphere ended and space began. This would be his 7th flight, 365 OS 97, a test meant to reach an altitude of 250,000 feet, more than 47 miles above the Earth. It was a routine mission by X-15 standards, but everyone in the program knew routine was a dangerous word. At exactly 10:30 a.m., the B-52 released the X-15 from 45,000 feet over Delamar Dry Lake. The moment Adams hit the ignition, the rocket came alive. 57,000 pounds of thrust blasted him forward, pressing him into his seat as the aircraft roared upward. In seconds, the desert fell away beneath him. The sky darkened from blue to indigo to black. He was riding a controlled explosion into space. Everything looked perfect. The X-15 climbed steeply and cleanly through the atmosphere. Instruments stable, engine burning bright. Within minutes, Adams reached an altitude of 266,000 feet, officially entering space. He became one of the few humans in history to see Earth curve below him, glowing blue and white beneath an infinite black sky. But up there, above the breathable world, something subtle began to go wrong. The X-15 started to drift. In the near vacuum of space, there was no wind resistance, no feeling in the controls to warn him. The aircraft was quietly twisting off course, and Adams didn't realize it yet. The reaction control system wasn't responding properly. Down on the ground, engineers at Edwards tracked his flight path, unaware of the silent instability building above. Adams began his descent, but the yaw became worse. The X-15 started to spin. Not a gentle rotation, but a violent, tumbling motion, the kind that even the most skilled pilot can't easily stop. He fought the controls, tried to steady her. His voice came over the radio, strained but calm. "I'm in a spin." Mission Control couldn't see his true orientation. The data was patchy, the plasma around the aircraft blocking signals. They told him to stay steady, to work through it. But there was no spin recovery procedure for a rocket plane moving faster than Mach 5. Adams was now falling back into the atmosphere, sideways, spinning end over end at over 3,000 miles per hour. As he re-entered thicker air, aerodynamic forces slammed into the X-15. The aircraft's angle of attack was so extreme that it was flying almost broadside into the air. The G-forces mounted 5 Gs, 10 Gs, 15 Gs. Adams struggled to correct, but at that speed, even the smallest movement could send the craft into chaos. The black horizon spun wildly in front of him. At 65,000 feet, traveling at Mach 3.9, the X-15 reached its breaking point. The stress on the airframe was beyond anything human or machine could bear. The aircraft began to tear itself apart, wings shearing off, fragments scattering across the desert sky. In his final moments, Adams likely lost consciousness. Seconds later, the X-15 disintegrated in a flash of fire and metal. Debris rained down over the barren desert near Johannesburg, California. The main wreckage carved a deep crater into the sand. Rescue teams rushed to the site and found Adams's body still strapped into his seat. The ejection system had never fired. It was over in less than 11 minutes. They found that he had done everything right, every move logical, every effort heroic. But at those speeds, at those altitudes, a single misreading could turn triumph into tragedy. The loss of Michael Adams sent shockwaves through the spaceflight community. NASA and the Air Force convened an accident board, searching for answers in the twisted wreckage. His cockpit camera was found smashed, but after days of searching, engineers recovered the tiny film cartridge that revealed his final seconds, a man calmly working the controls until the end. The board made crucial changes after his death: new ground-based attitude indicators, better pilot training for disorientation, and tighter safeguards on flight control systems. From that day forward, mission controllers could see exactly what their pilots saw: pitch, roll, yaw, heading in real time. It was a lesson written in blood and sky. Major Michael J. Adams was posthumously awarded astronaut wings, making him the first person to earn them by dying in space. His name is carved into the Space Mirror Memorial in Florida, alongside others who gave their lives pushing the boundaries of human flight.
A 29-year-old man has been charged with 20 offences, including manslaughter and high-range drink driving, after 4 children were killed in Sydney.
It was February 1st, 2020, in Oatlands, a quiet suburb of Western Sydney. For the Abdallah and Sakra families, it was just another Saturday. 7 children walked together toward a local shop, laughing, planning to buy ice cream. Among them were siblings Anthony, Angelina, and Sienna Abdallah, their cousin Veronique Sakra, and 3 friends. But within seconds, everything turned into a nightmare. Behind the wheel of a blue Mitsubishi 4WD was 30-year-old Samuel William Davidson. He had been drinking since morning, beer, rum, vodka cruisers, mixing it with drugs like MDMA. Witnesses later remembered him shirtless, laughing, making obscene gestures as he sped recklessly through Sydney's suburbs. He ran red lights, forced drivers off the road, swerved between lanes as if nothing could stop him. By the time he reached Beddington Road, his car was a missile. In a 50 km/h zone, he pushed 133. At impact, he was still flying at 111. The vehicle mounted the curb and plowed straight into the group of children. The force scattered bodies across 17 meters, some dragged against a fence. 4 were killed instantly. Anthony, 13, Angelina, 12, Sienna, just 8 years old, and their cousin Veronique, 11. 3 others were left broken, one slipping into a coma for weeks. Davidson stepped out of the wreck unharmed. Shocked witnesses heard him mutter, "What have I done? I'm going to jail." The scene drew nearly 200 people. Grief was so raw, so overwhelming, police had to call in the riot squad to hold the crowd back. Cameras captured Davidson shirtless, handcuffed, being dragged away. And the next morning, when microphones crowded outside the Abdallah home, the world expected silence. Instead, Danny Abdallah stood there, broken but unshaken, describing each of his children. Anthony, a young basketballer dreaming of honoring Kobe Bryant. Angelina, his little helper. Sienna, the actress of the family, bursting with life. Through tears, he said, "These kids were just walking innocently. And now I've lost 3 of them." But what stunned everyone was his wife Layla's words. Through unimaginable grief, she said she did not hate Davidson. That choice, to forgive, stopped the nation cold. While Davidson's parents insisted their son was a good man who lost his way, the Abdallahs chose to respond not with rage, but mercy. In April 2021, Davidson pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including 4 counts of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 28 years, later reduced to 20. In prison, he turned to faith, reading the Bible, clinging to the family's forgiveness as his only lifeline. He eventually met Danny Abdallah face to face. They prayed together. Danny told him about each child. When asked if Davidson should stay in prison, Danny's response was haunting. "If it were up to me, I'd bring him out tomorrow. Justice is to have my kids back." The crash site became a shrine. Thousands left flowers, candles, toys, and photos. Courtrooms overflowed with grief-stricken statements. Veronique's mother said, "No court or sentence can ever compensate for what we've lost." And yet, the Abdallah's message never changed. Through unbearable pain, they spoke of forgiveness, of choosing love over hate. Danny's words echoed across the country. There are no winners in this. All we can do is try to find joy in the middle of pain. It was just past midnight on October 24th, 2024, when a chilling silence fell over Lakeshore Boulevard East in Toronto. Moments earlier, the sound of screeching tires had ripped through the night, followed by a devastating explosion that lit up the darkness like a warning flare. In the wreckage, a Tesla Model Y burned violently, flames swallowing it whole before anyone could make sense of what had just happened. Inside that car were 5 young people, Friends, dreamers, lives in motion. Digvijay Patel, Neil Raj Gohil, and his sister Kataba Gohil. They never had a chance. What started as a drive turned into something far more horrifying. The vehicle, for reasons still under investigation, lost control. It slammed into a guardrail, then collided with a concrete pillar at terrifying speed. And then the fire, immediate and unforgiving. Most people don't realize that Tesla vehicles, while packed with high-tech safety systems, are powered by lithium-ion batteries that can ignite in a crash and are nearly impossible to put out. That night, the fire spread so fast the car became a furnace within seconds. But what made the tragedy even worse was the failure of the electronic door system. The power was gone, the doors locked. Trapped inside, the passengers had no way out. Tesla does have manual door releases, but in the chaos of a burning car, smoke choking your lungs, and seconds ticking away, who can think clearly? That night, the same technology designed to protect them became their biggest obstacle. But somehow, one survived. A 25-year-old woman in the back seat was still conscious, but pinned. The heat was closing in fast. That's when Rick Harper, a Canada Post worker passing by, saw the burning vehicle. Without hesitating, he grabbed a metal pole, shattered the rear window, and helped the woman crawl out. She escaped with her life. Barely. What Harper didn't realize was that 4 others were still inside. Smoke filled the cabin. The fire spread too fast. By the time anyone could respond, it was already too late. The aftermath left Toronto in shock. How could a vehicle, marketed as one of the safest on the road, become a steel tomb? Tesla boasts features like automatic braking, stability control, and stellar crash test ratings. But when power is lost, none of that matters. All those features vanish with the electricity. And this wasn't the first time. The lone survivor now carries emotional scars few can imagine. She lived, but lost 4 of her closest friends. Jay, Digvijay, Neil, and Kataba had full lives ahead of them. Now just memories remain. Authorities are still trying to determine what caused the crash. The only certainty is that once the Tesla hit the pillar, it became a death trap. A high-tech machine built for safety turned into something no one could escape from. Tesla, for its part, continues to point to its strong safety record, citing crash test ratings, low rollover risks, and autopilot features. But those statistics mean little when basic functions, like opening a door in an emergency, fail when needed most. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has already raised red flags about the Model Y, from sudden braking to unintended acceleration. But those sound like technical terms until they're tied to real people, real deaths, and real grief. Toronto is left mourning. 4 families shattered. 1 survivor left with the weight of memory and trauma, and a haunting question. How could a car built with so much intelligence fail in the most critical moment? This isn't just a story about one car crash. It's about what happens when innovation gets ahead of safety, when sleek design overlooks real-world survival. Tesla may have redefined the car industry, but this tragedy is a stark reminder. No matter how advanced the technology, it must work when it counts.
Tonight, Yavapai County Sheriff's investigators looking into answers about what caused the deadly crash near Prescott. Deputies say that 39-year-old Kristen Little of Prescott was killed when her car rolled down a cliff near Thumb Butte.
It was August 16th, 2024, in Prescott, Arizona. Kristen Little, a 39-year-old real estate agent known for her bright energy and adventurous spirit, had just celebrated her birthday. She was close to her family, especially her mother, Jinger Cutting, who still held on to memories of their recent girls' trip to Las Vegas. Laughter-filled days, snapshots of joy that now felt frozen in time. That evening, Kristen decided to do something she loved. She packed up her miniature German Shepherd, CJ, and drove toward Thumb Butte, a mountainous trail she often hiked with her mom. It was her happy place, a spot where sunsets stretched endlessly over the Arizona sky. No one expected it would be her final destination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Kristen began the drive back home along a winding dirt road, steep, narrow, beautiful, and unforgiving. Somewhere along the route, something went terribly wrong. Her car drifted from the right side of the road, veered sharply left, and then vanished. It plummeted nearly 1,000 feet down a jagged cliffside. The silence that followed was eerie. No screeching brakes, no warning. When first responders finally reached the remote crash site, they found Kristen's vehicle mangled and twisted in the trees far below. Kristen had been ejected from the car. She didn't survive. Her body was discovered nearby, still and silent beneath the vast Arizona sky. It was already dark. The terrain was treacherous. Authorities made the gut-wrenching decision to wait until morning to recover her remains, but they didn't leave her alone. Deputies stayed overnight, guarding the site, making sure Kristen wasn't left in the darkness without care. But in the middle of the wreckage, one astonishing detail emerged. CJ, her dog, her constant companion, was alive. Against all odds, the tiny German Shepherd had been thrown from the car but somehow survived. No major injuries, no burns, just shaken. He remained near Kristen, almost as if refusing to leave her side. When the deputies brought him back to Jinger, the moment was overwhelming. She clutched him tightly and whispered through tears, "God gave me CJ." It was the only piece of Kristen she could still hold. It was Kristen's Apple Watch that sent out the distress signal. The device detected the brutal impact and triggered an automatic alert. In such a remote area, that signal likely made the difference between days and hours in finding her. Jinger later expressed quiet gratitude for that small sliver of technology, as strange as it felt. Without it, the wait could have been even longer, the wondering even worse. Kristen wasn't just a daughter. She was a force. She loved the outdoors, the thrill of a hike, the calm of paddleboarding, the joy of having CJ at her side. She had built a respected real estate career but never let go of the part of her that chased adventure. People in Prescott knew her, loved her. The outpouring of grief when the news spread was immediate and raw. Messages, flowers, and stories filled social media. Friends shared how Kristen made them feel seen, how her laughter made bad days better, how her presence lit up rooms. Jinger, still dazed in her grief, remembered their hikes through Thumb Butte, their early morning talks, the way Kristen always wanted to be outside, exploring. "She was the light of my life," she said, her voice breaking. "She put her heart into everything. The cause of the crash is still being investigated." Jinger and her husband, John, a retired police officer, plan to meet with authorities. They know it won't bring her back, but they need answers. Anything to make sense of the senseless. To honor Kristen, Jinger is organizing a celebration of life, an outdoor event near Watson Lake where those who knew and loved her can gather, laugh, cry, remember, and she's going further. She's working on a foundation in Kristen and CJ's names, one that could support rescue efforts and push for safety changes in the area. Thumb Butte, beautiful as it is, lacks guardrails along stretches of dangerous road. Jinger wants that to change. She doesn't want any other mother standing where she stood. The heartbreak is immense. The hole Kristen leaves behind feels impossible to fill. But her story, her energy, her love for nature, her connection with her dog and her family won't fade.
The accident was at a well-known danger spot. In the French countryside, there are more and more big vehicles, too often travelling at speed.
It was October 23rd, 2015 in southwestern France. A group of retirees from the tiny village of Petit-Palais-et-Cournon had set off on what was meant to be a peaceful day trip. These were neighbors, friends, couples who had shared countless outings together, now packed onto a bus, ready to enjoy the golden vineyards near Saint-Emilion. The bus glided along a narrow forested road. Coming from the opposite direction, a logging truck appeared, navigating the same tight bend. At the wheel was 30-year-old Cyril Alexandre, his 3-year-old son sitting beside him. The truck was heavy. Its load was a dangerous mix of timber and a large external tank of gasoline for chainsaws. As the truck rounded the bend, something went wrong. Maybe the weight shifted. Maybe the curve was too sharp. Cyril lost control. In a terrifying instant, the truck jackknifed across the road, skidding straight into the path of the bus. The impact was deafening. Metal crushed against metal. The truck's fuel tank burst, spilling gasoline that raced across the pavement, right under the bus. Sparks flew, and then flames. The fire erupted so fast it was like an explosion. Within seconds, both vehicles were engulfed. Plastic fittings inside the bus melted. Smoke thickened the air, and the searing heat trapped passengers where they sat. Out of 50 souls on that bus, only 8 would make it out alive. Somehow, the bus driver managed to react in those crucial moments. Seeing the disaster unfold, he opened the emergency exits before the inferno consumed everything. It was enough to save a few lives, but for most it was too late. Jean-Claude Leonard, 73, was among the lucky few. He and his wife, Josette, had just fastened their seatbelts when the crash came. The fire spread, he said, like lightning. Desperate, he unbuckled them both and dragged Josette toward a fire exit. They tumbled out into the chaos, only to see friends and neighbors trapped inside, screaming for help. Without thinking, Jean-Claude ran back, flames licking at his clothes. He and another driver pulled 2 passengers from the wreckage before the fire's fury forced them back. The bus tires exploded. Windows shattered. The entire vehicle became a blazing tomb. When it was over, 41 people lay dead inside the bus. Many never even had a chance to stand. Emergency hammers were there, but panic, smoke, and the speed of the fire made them useless. Some passengers couldn't reach them. Some didn't know they were there. In the end, the fire was so ferocious that both the bus and the truck were reduced to blackened skeletons. Smoke from the wreck could be seen for miles. Cyril Alexander and his little boy never made it out of the truck. In total, 43 lives were lost that morning, marking France's deadliest road disaster in over 3 decades. The scene that followed was haunting. Firefighters, helicopters, emergency crews, all arrived to a landscape of devastation. Families waited for news that would break their hearts. Identifying the victims took weeks. The fire had been that cruel.
We begin this hour in the Eastern Cape, where there's a glimmer of hope for justice in the murder of a woman and her 5 children.
It was September 2019 in South Africa. Karen Turner, a 31-year-old schoolteacher, had celebrated her birthday. She was 3 months pregnant, happily married, and on a short trip with her husband Matthew and their 23-month-old son, Hayden. The family had chosen Lula Nature Reserve for their getaway. On the night of September 16th, at around 3 a.m., Matthew awoke in agony. He felt a stabbing pain in his stomach, sharp and sudden. He was being attacked. 2 men had slipped into the chalet under the cover of night. While one drove a knife into Matthew, the other lunged at Karen. She didn't even have a chance to fight back. Despite his wound, Matthew wrestled one of the attackers, forcing the fight down the stairs of the chalet, blood trailing across the wooden floor. Upstairs, Karen was still conscious, still fighting to hold on. Through the horror, she managed to whisper to Matthew, "Check on Hayden." But when Matthew turned back, the sight froze him in place. Karen had collapsed. She was gone, and with her, the child she carried. Hayden, confused and terrified, was later found in his room crying for his mother. The attackers never touched him. They never touched the money, the phones, or the valuables scattered around the room. They came in silently, spilled blood, and vanished into the night. They didn't steal. They didn't demand. They just killed. The Turners' friends, staying in a nearby chalet, had woken up to the sound of shouting and commotion. They rushed over and were met with a sight they would never forget. Matthew opened the door covered in blood, barely standing, while behind him lay the aftermath of unspeakable violence. Karen was lifeless. The lodge floor told the story in streaks of red from the bedroom to the stairs. The couple's peaceful retreat had turned into a scene out of a nightmare. Matthew was taken first to a hospital in Mthatha, then airlifted for emergency surgery in Pietermaritzburg. He survived after doctors removed part of his intestine, but his survival was razor thin. Karen's brother Ian rushed to the reserve when he got the call. What he found was chilling. The doors open, no forced entry, no evidence of a robbery. Matthew's account remained steady. He woke from pain, saw Karen being attacked, and fought one of the men until they fled by leaping off the balcony. Ian later confirmed the story, adding that Karen, in her final moments, had begged her husband to check on their baby. Their family, their future, torn away in seconds. Just days later, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were scheduled to visit South Africa, and the world's eyes turned toward the country. Rising crime rates were already making headlines. Over 21,000 violent deaths had been recorded that year alone, with 45,000 serious attacks. The government had even deployed the army into parts of Cape Town. But Karen's case felt different. It wasn't random violence on the street. It was something darker, more personal, more chilling. Police identified one suspect, but admitted the second man remained unknown. Still, the motive never made sense. Why kill a pregnant woman in her sleep and leave without taking anything?
Lady, she was the China Games gold medalist on this event. Huge vault.
She was already a star before most kids her age knew how to spell gymnastics. Sang Lan was a force in China's elite sports system, graceful, explosive, and disciplined beyond her years. By 14, she had swept every event at the Zhejiang Province Championships. By 17, she was one of China's most promising vaulters, eyes locked on the global stage. She didn't make it to the Olympics, but she was close, too close, and then everything changed. It was July 1998, New York City, the Goodwill Games. Sang was warming up for the vault final, a simple drill called a timer, the kind gymnasts do 1,000 times without thinking. She sprinted down the runway, planted her hands, launched, and never got up again. She landed hard, motionless, staring up at the arena lights, unable to move. Medics rushed in. A stunned silence fell over the gym. Spectators looked on, confused at first, then horrified. Sang was whisked to Nassau University Medical Center. Surgeons performed emergency spinal realignment and cervical fusion, but the truth came fast and cruel. The damage to her spinal cord was irreversible. Sang Lan, once destined to soar, was now paralyzed from the chest down. Her body was broken, but her spirit refused to be. Sang stayed in New York for nearly a year, undergoing grueling rehab at Mount Sinai. It wasn't just about learning how to live again. It was about staying seen in a world that had once celebrated her flips, but now didn't know what to say. Celebrities came. Leonardo DiCaprio, Celine Dion, even Superman himself, Christopher Reeve. They offered words of hope, but nothing could undo the fall. She was even honored in Times Square on New Year's Eve, smiling through unimaginable pain. But beneath that public grace, something darker lingered. Years later, Sang finally spoke out. She claimed her injury hadn't been a freak accident. It had been negligence. According to her, another team's coach had walked into the vaulting area mid-run and removed a crucial safety mat just before her takeoff. She says she told officials immediately, even from her hospital bed, but her voice was dismissed. They told her she was confused, that she had brain damage, that she should be quiet. Sang wasn't quiet. She accused the Chinese national gymnastics team of abandoning her after the accident, of discarding her like a broken doll once she could no longer win medals, and when she was finally old enough to stand up for herself, she began preparing to sue the event's organizers. Not for money, but for truth, because Sang Lan wasn't just another tragic sports story. She became something more powerful. Back in China, she transformed into a symbol, an advocate for disability rights, and a reminder that broken bones don't always mean broken spirits. A television miniseries was made about her. She hosted her own Olympic-themed TV show. She became a torchbearer for the 2008 Beijing Olympics and enrolled at Peking University, determined to live a full, visible life. She even trained for the Paralympics, hoping to represent her country in table tennis. And through it all, she fought against pain, against silence, against invisibility. She regained partial use of her arms. She kept doing therapy. She kept dreaming. Sang Lan never made it to the Olympic podium. But her story, raw, unfinished, painfully real, might be more powerful than any gold medal, because she showed the world that while gymnastics may have taken her ability to walk, it never stole her voice.
Justice almost a decade in the making. Heather Mack has been sentenced to almost 26 years in prison.
The Oak Park woman pleaded guilty to helping kill her own mother during a vacation in Bali in 2014.
It was August 12, 2014 in Nusa Dua, Bali. At the opulent St. Regis Resort, 62-year-old Sheila von Wiese Mack was supposed to be enjoying a peaceful vacation with her daughter, 18-year-old Heather. But behind the silk sheets and ocean breeze, something was terribly off. Sheila wasn't just any tourist. Back home in Chicago, she was a respected figure in elite circles, the widow of renowned jazz composer James L. Mack, and someone who, despite her wealth, was fiercely protective of her daughter. And Heather? Well, Heather had secrets. She was pregnant. She hadn't told her mother everything. She didn't just bring her baggage to Bali. She brought her boyfriend. 21-year-old Tommy Schaefer arrived quietly, slipping into the resort with a business-class ticket secretly purchased using Sheila's credit card. Sheila had no idea he was coming. She'd spent months trying to separate her daughter from him, moving houses, changing routines, even uprooting her life in an attempt to shield Heather from what she believed was a dangerous relationship. But Heather and Tommy weren't ready to let go. In fact, they had a plan. The night Tommy arrived, hotel surveillance caught a tense scene in the lobby. He and Sheila arguing, their body language tight with fury. What followed wasn't impulsive. It was months in the making. Back in Chicago, Heather and Tommy had exchanged chilling text messages about killing Sheila. They'd even offered $50,000 to Tommy's cousin to find someone to carry it out. Tommy would later claim that during the argument, Sheila threatened to harm the unborn baby. "That's when," he said. He snapped. He grabbed a heavy metal fruit bowl from the room and began to strike Sheila again and again until she collapsed, her face bloodied, her breath gone. The forensic evidence showed brutal facial injuries. Heather didn't stop him. She helped clean up. They wrapped Sheila's body in a hotel bedsheet, stuffed it into a suitcase. They had to force it shut, and in doing so, they broke her neck. They wheeled the suitcase through the pristine halls of the five-star resort. No one suspected a thing until the blood started leaking. A taxi driver noticed it first, red seeping from the suitcase into his trunk. Alarmed, he alerted hotel staff, who quickly called the police. But by the time officers arrived, Heather and Tommy had vanished. They fled to a nearby hotel, thinking maybe they'd bought themselves some time. They hadn't. Less than 24 hours later, they were caught. People back home were stunned. Between 2010 and 2013, police had been called to the Mack household a staggering 86 times. Domestic disturbances, missing person reports. Most of them involved Heather. She'd already spent time in juvenile detention, had psychiatric evaluations, and been known to lash out violently. But through it all, Sheila never gave up on her daughter. She tried everything: therapy, structure, even isolation. And yet, on this trip, the very one meant to rescue their bond, Heather sealed her mother's fate. Sheila had been recovering from a fall earlier in the trip. She was resting, vulnerable. That's when Heather booked Tommy's flight. Hours after he arrived, her mother was dead. When the case went to trial, the revelations kept coming. Heather wasn't some manipulated teen. She had been actively involved in the planning. The motive? Some believed it was control. Others pointed to greed. Heather thought she stood to inherit up to $11 million. That inheritance would later help fund her defense. $150,000 of it, in fact. Money from Sheila's own estate. Tommy was sentenced to 18 years. Heather, surprisingly, only got 10. In prison, she thrived in ways that seemed unsettling. Joining dance groups, learning languages, even working as a translator. Tommy, on the other hand, struggled. Isolated, beaten, angry. In a 2019 interview, he expressed remorse. Heather didn't, at least not at first. In 2017, she posted a video in which she said she didn't regret what happened. Then, in 2021, Heather walked out of prison early for good behavior. The moment she touched U.S. soil, federal agents were waiting. She was arrested again. In court, she finally apologized to her family. Her uncle, Bill, said it was the first time she'd done so, but even then, he wasn't sure she meant it. Today, Heather sits in a U.S. federal prison, sentenced to 26 years. Tommy is still locked up in Indonesia, and the little girl they brought into the world, Stella, is now 10, living with Sheila's niece in Colorado. She's cut off all contact with her mother. After years of fighting, Heather gave up her claim to the inheritance. That money now belongs to Stella.
We're learning more about the deadly crash that shut down I-20 in Kaufman County yesterday. 5 people died and a 6th person is in the hospital fighting for their life.
It was June 28th, 2025 in Kaufman County, Texas. For the McKellar family, it was the last stretch of a trip that should have ended safely in Fort Worth. Inside their Ford F-150 sat 3 generations. 52-year-old Zabar McKellar, a quiet, steady man, was behind the wheel. His wife, 45-year-old Christian, known to her loved ones as Sean, was at his side, her energy and warmth filling the truck the way it always did. In the back were their children, 15-year-old Case, a rising football star full of promise, and 20-year-old Evan, a college student with strength and intelligence beyond her years. With them, riding home, was their grandfather, 79-year-old Billy McKellar, a man with deep ties to East Texas, who had just attended a funeral in Tyler that very day. It was supposed to be an ordinary drive home. Instead, it became the moment everything changed. At the same time, barreling down the same stretch of interstate was a semi-truck driven by 27-year-old Alexis Osmani Gonzalez companion of Florida. He was hauling under Hoper LLC. The affidavit later revealed the truth. He was exhausted, and at some point, he fell asleep behind the wheel. His foot never touched the brakes. He was still moving at 75 miles per hour when the semi plowed into the back of the McKellar's pickup. The impact was catastrophic. The F-150 was crushed instantly, torn apart as the semi continued forward, colliding with 2 other 18-wheelers and several more vehicles, including a gray Jeep Compass. Emergency crews rushed to the scene. Police declared it a mass casualty event, but for the McKellar family, it was already too late. Zabar, Christian, their teenage son Case, and Billy were all pronounced dead at the scene. Their lives ended in an instant. The only survivor was 20-year-old Evan. She was airlifted to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, fighting for her life in the ICU. One of her feet had to be amputated. Though she lived, her road to recovery would be long and grueling. Another life was also lost in the chain reaction. 49-year-old Nicole Gregory of Dallas, who had been driving the Jeep Compass, was killed instantly. In total, 5 people were gone, and 1 young woman remained. Broken, but alive. The devastation rippled far beyond that highway. Pastor Rodney McIntosh, who called himself an adopted son of the McKellar family, said through tears, "I don't know how you make sense of moments like these." Friends and neighbors remembered Zabar as strong and steady, Krishan as vibrant and caring. Their son Case had been the pride of North Crowley High School's football team, a young man who had just led his team to a championship. His classmates began planning a vigil in his honor. Evan, still fighting for her life in the hospital, became the symbol of resilience, even as her heart carried the unbearable weight of loss. Billy's friends mourned just as deeply. One of his closest companions, Von D. Mosley, recalled their decades-long bond. "We were like two peas in a pod," he said. "I'm grateful for the time I had with him." But behind the grief, questions grew. Why was that semi still on the road? Why didn't the driver stop? Investigators confirmed he had never hit the brakes. Hopper LLC already had a history of violations, including issues with drivers going over their allowed hours.
Over on the box. Mario Marchetti scores 14.333 for parallel bars. The next performer.
He was only 23, but already a national hero. Anton Malysz had stood on the Olympic podium in Amsterdam just 2 years earlier, bronze medal around his neck, his future wide open, his name whispered as one of the rising greats. And yet, on a rain-soaked day in the summer of 1930, all of that promise ended, not with the roar of a crowd, but with silence. What should have been another step toward immortality became a tragedy that haunts gymnastics to this day. The World Championships in Luxembourg had been cursed from the beginning. The skies opened up, rain pounding the city until organizers were forced to abandon the stadium. The solution was hasty, careless, move the competition into a cramped school gym, set up the apparatus on thin, unfit mats, and hope no one noticed. No time for proper safeguards. No thought for what might happen if something went wrong. But the athletes had trained too long, dreamed too hard, and so the event pressed forward. Anton, known to friends as Tone, took his place on the rings. His movements were clean, precise, his body flowing with the kind of strength only years of sacrifice could forge. Then came the dismount, the final note in his routine. But when his body hit the ground, there was no safe cushion to break the fall. The mat, barely more than a layer of padding, gave way instantly. He collapsed, his body crumpling under the impact. There were no flashing cameras, no medical teams charging in, just stunned silence, the sound of hurried footsteps, panicked whispers filling the gym. He was rushed to a local hospital, but the truth was obvious from the start. His spine had shattered, the kind of injury no young athlete can survive. He held on through the night. By the morning of July 15, 1930, Anton Malysz was gone, and yet the competition continued. His teammates, reeling from shock, chose to compete anyway. Josip Primožič went on to win the all-around, the Yugoslav team taking third place. But what is victory when one of your brothers never makes it back to stand beside you? The cheers rang hollow, medals heavy with grief. This wasn't fate. It wasn't bad luck. Fellow gymnast Edvard Antošević, who had once shared the Olympic podium with Anton, later pointed to the truth: negligence, the rushed relocation, the unfit equipment, the mats that were barely mats at all. Even Leon Stukelj, another Yugoslav legend, slipped from the high bar that day and was forced to withdraw. The warnings were there, but Anton paid the final price. When his body returned to Ljubljana 3 days later, the entire city seemed to stop breathing. Tabor Hall became a place of mourning as more than 10,000 people came to say their final goodbye. His casket passed slowly through Skopje Loka and into Bohinjska Bistrica, where the boy who once dreamed beneath the mountain skies was finally laid to rest. His grave, marked with a bronze bust, stands as a reminder: even legends can fall. But his story did not end there. A memorial competition was founded in his honor in 1970. Streets in Ljubljana and Bohinjska Bistrica bear his name. His legacy lives on in the movement he once embodied, in the chants of athletes who know that the sport he died for must always carry the weight of his sacrifice. Anton Malysz did not die in war. He did not die in battle. He died doing what he loved, betrayed not by his body, but by the failure of those who should have protected him. And perhaps that is the most haunting truth of all.
His name was Mark Cox. He was 36. He died from alcohol poisoning after visiting the Wild nightclub in Krakow with a friend. Now, it's alleged he was forced to drink 22 shots there.
In October 2017, Mark Cox, a 36-year-old man from Loftus, North Yorkshire, set off on a quick getaway to Krakow, Poland. It was supposed to be just a few days of fun with his friend, Steven Skiba, two single guys looking to unwind, have a few drinks, share some laughs, and make memories. But Mark never made it home. Back in the UK, Mark was known as a hard worker, someone who regularly pulled extra shifts so he could enjoy life more, especially weekends watching Leeds United with his dad, Graham. That's what makes what happened in Krakow so devastating. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Their first night in the city, Mark and Steven were cautious. Krakow had a reputation for pickpockets, tourist scams, shady clubs that looked fun from the outside but could turn nasty fast. They walked into a strip club called Wild Night, not realizing how prophetic that name would become. Even before their first drinks were done, something felt wrong. Waitresses aggressively pushed them to order more. Prices skyrocketed out of nowhere. Stephen felt dizzy like his drink had been spiked. Uneasy, they left, but the next night, they returned. Why go back? Maybe they chalked up the bad vibe to jet lag or paranoia. Maybe Mark didn't want his holiday to feel like a bust. Whatever the reason, they stepped back into Wild Night. This time, everything unraveled fast. Stephen quickly sensed danger. Other patrons stumbled past him, slurring, confused. One even warned him, "They're robbing people in there." Alarmed, he flagged down a passing police car, but instead of help, the officers laughed, dismissed him, drove away. A nearby shopkeeper, seeing his panic, muttered something terrifying. "Those police? They're mafia!" Now terrified, Stephen rushed back into the club to find Mark, but bouncers blocked him. They grinned, insisting everything was fine. Told him to stay, order drinks, relax. He pleaded, pushed, but they refused to let him through. Then chaos broke loose. 2 dancers sprinted out from the back, shouting in panic. Paramedics rushed in. Stephen couldn't see who they were trying to save, but he knew. Deep down, he already knew. Still, staff tried to lie. "It's a misunderstanding," they said. But when he pressed again, a bouncer smirked and said coldly, "Your friend is dead." Mark Cox had been forced to drink shot after shot. Not a few, not even a dozen. 22 shots of high-proof alcohol in rapid succession, a deadly amount. His blood alcohol level was at least 4% enough to kill nearly anyone. Mark had begged them to stop. He'd pleaded, but they didn't care. Instead, they emptied his wallet around 420 pounds and left him to die. Stephen stood there as paramedics tried to revive his best friend. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. Just cold silence. Back in North Yorkshire, the news hit like a bomb. His family was shattered. His sister Samantha couldn't understand it. And then came the investigation. Polish authorities uncovered a vast criminal network. Wild Night was no ordinary strip club. It was part of an organized scheme targeting tourists. Staff worked together to spike drinks, force shots, and run up obscene charges. In some cases, they even manipulated victims into taking out loans to pay off fake debts. Over 700 criminal charges were filed. Arrests were made, but no one has been held directly responsible for Mark's death. For his family, that truth is unbearable. Samantha and her loved ones have fought relentlessly for justice, for real answers, for accountability. But they've been met with stone walls and empty promises, nothing that even comes close to easing the pain of losing Mark. Because this wasn't just one tragic night. It was the result of a system that profits from human vulnerability. And Mark Cox, funny, loyal, hardworking, was one of its most devastating victims.
His name was Mark Cox. He was 36. He died from alcohol poisoning after visiting the Wild nightclub in Krakow with a friend. Now, it's alleged he was forced to drink 22 shots there.
In October 2017, Mark Cox, a 36-year-old man from Loftus, North Yorkshire, packed his bags for what was supposed to be a carefree escape. Just a short trip with his friend, Stephen Skiba, a couple of single guys heading to Krakow, Poland, looking to unwind, blow off some steam, maybe drink a little, laugh a lot, and come home with some good stories. But Mark never made it home. Those who knew him remember that Mark worked hard, pulling extra shifts just so he could enjoy his time off even more, usually to watch his beloved Leeds United with his dad, Graham. That's what makes what happened in Krakow so gut-wrenching. The first night, Mark and Stephen were cautious. They knew Krakow had a reputation. Pickpockets, scams, tourist traps with sharp teeth. They carried only enough cash for the evening and found themselves at a place called Wild Night. The name should have been a warning. Even before they finished their drinks, red flags were waving. Staff wouldn't stop pushing them. More drinks, more time, more money. Stephen didn't feel right. His head was spinning. He suspected his drink had been tampered with. They left quickly, but the next night, they went back. It's easy to wonder why. Maybe they thought the first visit was just bad luck. Maybe they felt silly being paranoid. Maybe Mark didn't want his holiday to end on a sour note, and Stephen, not wanting to disappoint his friend, agreed to try again. That decision would cost Mark his life. They wandered Krakow's cobbled streets, the kind that seem charming by day but become a maze of shadows at night. Eventually, they ended up at Wild Night again. The pressure started the moment they stepped through the door. This time, they were separated, led to different booths, different paths, and everything spiraled from there. Stephen noticed something wasn't right immediately. Patrons were stumbling out of the club, confused, disoriented, some even warning him outright. "They're robbing people in there." Alarmed, Stephen left and flagged down a police car. But instead of help, he got laughter. The officers mocked him, then drove off. A nearby shopkeeper, seeing his panic, said something chilling. "Those police? They're part of the mafia." With dread in his stomach, Stephen ran back inside to find Mark, but bouncers blocked him. They insisted he stay, buy more drinks, relax. They grinned as they denied him access to the back. He pushed, pleaded, but they wouldn't let him through. Then everything turned to chaos. 2 dancers bolted from the back, shouting. Paramedics rushed in. Stephen's heart dropped. He couldn't see who they were trying to save, but he knew. Something in him just knew. Club staff told him everything was fine, a misunderstanding. But when he asked again, a bouncer laughed and sneered, "Your friend is dead." Mark Cox had been forced to drink. Not a couple of shots, not a bottle. 22 shots of alcohol in rapid-fire succession. That volume would kill nearly anyone. His blood alcohol content was at least 4%, lethal. He'd begged them to stop, but they wouldn't. They made him drink. And when his body gave out, when he collapsed, no one helped. Instead, they took his wallet, about 420 pounds. Then they let him die. Stephen watched as emergency crews worked on Mark's body. There was no more laughter now, just silence. Back in the UK, the news shattered everything. For Mark's family, it felt impossible. His sister Samantha couldn't comprehend how her vibrant, full-of-life brother was gone. Not in a car crash, not from illness, but from a predatory scheme run out of a strip club pretending to offer fun while preying on unsuspecting tourists. Polish authorities launched an investigation, and what they uncovered was monstrous. Wild Night wasn't just a shady bar. It was part of a sprawling criminal network. Club owners, staff, and others working together to entrap tourists. They spiked drinks, forced shots, drained bank accounts. In some cases, they even tricked victims into taking out loans to cover fake debts. Over 700 charges were filed. Arrests were made. But none of them have been held directly responsible for Mark's death. For his family, justice remains as out of reach as the man they lost. Samantha and her loved ones have fought for answers, for accountability, for closure. Instead, they've been left with silence, with vague promises, with nothing that can bring back the man they loved.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters. In the words of a flight director at NASA, it has been a bad day. 7 astronauts have died, their families shattered. The space program has been dealt a terrible blow. The larger family of men and women in space exploration devastated.
On January 16, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center for a 16-day science mission called STS-107. The crew of 7 astronauts included Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialists Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, and Israeli payload specialist Ilan Ramon. Their mission focused on conducting over 80 experiments in various scientific fields. During launch, a large piece of foam insulation broke off from the external fuel tank and struck Columbia's left wing. This happened just 81 seconds after liftoff, when the shuttle was traveling at over 1,500 mmHg. The impact created a small hole in the wing's thermal protection system, a damage that would prove fatal during re-entry. Engineers noticed the foam strike, but believed it was not a serious problem since similar incidents had happened before without causing disasters. NASA engineers requested high-resolution images from military satellites to inspect the wing, but mission managers denied the request. They reasoned that even if there was damage, nothing could be done to fix it while in orbit. The crew, unaware of the danger, carried out their experiments and maintained cheerful communication with mission control throughout the mission. On February 1, 2003, Columbia began its return to Earth. As it entered the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean, hot plasma entered through the hole in the left wing. Temperatures rose above 2,500 degrees, melting the aluminum structure inside. The sensors on the left wing began failing rapidly. At 8:59 a.m. EST, while the shuttle was 200,000 feet above Texas, Columbia's left wing tore away from the fuselage. Within seconds, the shuttle disintegrated, scattering debris across Texas and Louisiana. All 7 astronauts lost their lives instantly. The tragedy shocked the world. It was the second major disaster in the history of the NASA's Space Shuttle program, after the Challenger explosion in 1986. NASA suspended all shuttle flights for over 2 years to investigate and improve safety. Investigators found that the foam strike had been underestimated, and communication failures between engineers and management played a major role in the tragedy. In response, NASA made major changes to shuttle operations. Future missions included detailed inspections of the shuttle's heat shield while in orbit and procedures for on-orbit repairs. NASA also developed rescue plans for crews in case of serious damage. When flights resumed in 2005, new safety rules required that all missions go to the International Space Station so that astronauts could seek refuge if needed. The Columbia disaster marked the beginning of the end for the shuttle era, leading to the retirement of the fleet in 2011. The bravery of the STS-107 crew and the lessons learned from their loss continue to influence space safety and engineering standards today. It was February 21st, 2025. On the MacArthur Causeway, 19-year-old Gabriela Alejandra Rios Flores sat quietly inside her Jeep Wrangler. Only hours earlier, she had been laughing with friends at the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. Now, her car had stalled in the westbound lanes, and a police officer had helped her push it to the shoulder. Gabriela, an international student from El Salvador, was calm. She waited for help, believing the danger was behind her. She had come to the United States with a purpose, studying communication arts at Florida International University, determined to build a brighter future. With her were 2 other FIU students, Daniel Khan, 18, and Mudassir Ali, 19. They stood close by, chatting and waiting, but then everything changed. A silver Polestar Model 2 came tearing down the road, its headlights slicing through the night. Behind the wheel was 24-year-old Nicholas Devin Robinson. It was his birthday, and instead of celebrating with restraint, he had been drinking heavily in South Beach. A Miami Beach K-9 officer who had just helped Gabriela move her Jeep saw it first. Robinson's car swerving wildly, barreling toward them. He barely had time to react before the sound of screeching tires and tearing metal split the night. Robinson clipped a cement divider and then slammed directly into the back of Gabriela's Jeep. With a force so violent it hurled the vehicle across another divider and into the eastbound lanes. The Jeep flipped, twisting in midair before slamming onto the pavement. Inside, Gabriela didn't stand a chance. She was thrown from the car, landing on the asphalt near the wreckage. Emergency crews rushed her to Jackson Memorial Hospital's Ryder Trauma Center, but her injuries were too severe. Despite every effort, she didn't survive. Daniel Kahn's memory of the crash is fragmented. He later said he remembered only the lights and the speed of the oncoming car, then the sharp realization that his arm was broken. His forearm was shattered, leaving him unable to stand. Mudassir Ali wasn't physically injured, but his voice broke as he said later, "She was a very good friend of ours. I cannot process this. We want justice." And then there was Robinson, the man behind the wheel. When officers pulled him over, he seemed oblivious. Confused, almost arrogant, he asked, "Why are you stopping me? It's my birthday. Did you get the other car?" Police noted his slurred speech, his bloodshot eyes, the stench of alcohol hanging off him. At the station, he vomited and refused a blood test. A warrant had to be issued on the spot. His blood was drawn, and the evidence confirmed what was already obvious. He was driving drunk, reckless, and deadly. The crash shut down the causeway for hours. Miami woke up to the news of a promising young student killed, her dreams erased in seconds. For Gabriela's family in El Salvador, the pain was unimaginable. They had sent their daughter abroad for a future, and now they were preparing to bury her. Their attorney vowed to pursue justice to its fullest extent. In court, Judge Mindy S. Glazer made it clear, this was no accident. This was a choice. Robinson had driven nearly triple the speed limit, impaired on a busy causeway. She called the case serious, setting his bond at $200,000 and ordering house arrest if he was released. His lawyer entered a not guilty plea, buying time, waiting for evidence. But the charges piled high: vehicular homicide, manslaughter while impaired, reckless driving causing injury, impaired driving causing serious injury. For Gabriella's friends, no legal language could capture the loss. Daniel Kahn put it simply: "She was my friend, and I lost her. I hope the state attorney takes this case to the fullest and gives us justice. But the truth is, justice can't bring her back."
It all happened so quickly. 1 minute this bus was carrying a tired but happy group of teens who had spent the day at Kings Island. The next minute, there were headlights in the bus's path, a crash, a fire, and a frantic struggle against death.
It was May 14th, 1988. A group of children and adults from the First Assembly of God Church in Radcliffe, Kentucky, was supposed to be just that. They had spent the day at Kings Island Amusement Park. Laughter echoed on the way there, and by nightfall, they were tired but happy. 63 kids, ages 10 to 18, and 4 adult chaperones boarded their church bus for the ride home. They didn't know it, but they were about to be part of one of the deadliest drunk driving tragedies in American history. Around 10:30 p.m., as the bus made its way down Interstate 71 in Carroll County, a pickup truck appeared, coming from the wrong direction. Behind the wheel was 34-year-old Larry Mahoney. He was drunk, not just a little. His blood alcohol level was 0.24%, more than twice the legal limit. And in a few seconds, everything unraveled. The truck hit the bus head on. The force of the crash alone was devastating, but the nightmare didn't end there. The impact ruptured the bus's fuel tank, which was located near the front steps, an overlooked design flaw that became catastrophic in that moment. Flames exploded through the vehicle. The fire moved faster than most could react. Narrow aisles, no rear emergency door, a single side exit. Kids pushed and screamed and tried to climb over seats, but the smoke was thick and blinding, the heat suffocating. By the time rescuers got the fire under control, 27 lives were gone. 24 were children. Survivors were pulled from the burning wreckage. Some burned, some barely breathing. One of the victims was 10-year-old Patty Nunnally. Her mother, Carolyn, was home when the phone rang. It wasn't a rescue call. It was a request for Patty's dental records. Later, Carolyn learned her daughter hadn't burned to death. She'd inhaled toxic fumes before the fire took her, a detail no mother should have to carry. Mahoney was arrested at the scene, reeking of alcohol, his eyes dazed. He was charged and convicted of manslaughter and wanton endangerment. 16 years behind bars, but he didn't serve all of it. Good behavior shaved off the time. He was released in under 10 years. Since then, he hasn't spoken publicly. Not once. No apology, no explanation, just silence. But the silence didn't reach the families. In Fort Knox, in Radcliffe, grief echoed through every home. Some parents buried their children together. Some never saw their kids' faces again. The pain was enormous and it didn't fade, but from the ashes, some found purpose. Carolyn Nunnally, Patty's mother, turned her loss into a mission. She joined Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, and eventually became the organization's national president. She lobbied for stricter laws, better enforcement, and, most of all, safer vehicles. Her push led to tangible change. Buses were redesigned with fire-resistant seats, emergency exits were added, fuel tanks moved. A generation of kids would be safer because of the ones who didn't come home. But not every heartbreak could be healed with policy. Janet KDA Hancock lost her husband Chuck that night. He had been standing near the front of the bus and couldn't escape. For years, she carried that loss, until it returned. In 2010, her son Charlie, just 9 years old at the time of the 1988 crash, was killed by another drunk driver. 2 decades apart, same grief, same pain. A circle that never should have existed. Quentin Higgins was 15 when it happened. He'd been sitting near the front of the bus, burned, scarred, but alive. The crash changed him forever. Years later, he became a school bus driver, not because he forgot, but because he remembered. He even bought a bus nearly identical to the one from that night. Quentin drives that bus to schools, sharing the story, showing young people what one drunk decision can destroy. Every day when I drive, he says, I think of those kids, my friends who didn't make it. I speak for them because they can't. And he's right. They can't. But their stories do. As for Larry Mahoney, the man who started it all, he walks free, quietly, unseen. But those families live with the wreckage he left behind every single day. They look at old photographs and wonder what could have been. The Carrollton bus crash didn't just take lives. It changed them. It rewrote laws. It haunted communities. It forced America to confront a truth it still struggles with. Impaired driving isn't just reckless, it's deadly. And when it kills, it leaves behind more than victims. It was July 16, 2003 in Santa Monica, California. Arizona Avenue had been transformed into a lively farmer's market. A sea of colorful produce stands and cheerful chatter. Families strolled between vendors, children tugged at their parents' hands, and elderly couples soaked in the sunshine. Around 9,000 people were expected that day. The street was closed to traffic, creating what felt like a safe, peaceful space. But that peace shattered in an instant. At about 1:47 p.m., 86-year-old George Russell Weller was behind the wheel of his 1992 Buick LeSabre, heading west on Arizona Avenue. As he neared the barricaded market, something went horribly wrong. His car struck a Mercedes-Benz waiting at a crosswalk, but instead of stopping, Weller's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Witnesses watched in disbelief as the Buick veered around the barricades and roared into the crowd. The massive car became a weapon, barreling through the heart of the market at terrifying speed. 40, 60, maybe even 70 miles per hour, covering nearly 1,000 feet in just seconds. Stalls splintered like matchsticks. Tables were flattened. Produce, bags, shoes, and bodies were thrown into the air. Some described it as watching a tank tear through the street. The chaos was beyond comprehension. People screamed. Some ran. Others froze, trapped in the path of destruction. A small blue stroller stood abandoned at the curb, stained with blood. The stroller of a 3-year-old girl who didn't survive. Bodies lay where they fell. Red blankets covered the injured. Yellow tarps hid the dead. A red Buick sat at the center of the wreckage. Windshield shattered. Metal crumpled. Weller's car finally stopped after a pedestrian landed on his windshield, blocking his view. A nearby bicycle officer rushed in and pulled Weller from the car. Witnesses said the elderly man looked lost, confused, like he didn't understand what had just happened. Some thought he seemed frightened. Others swore he was oddly calm, even hugging people after leaving the station later that day. When the dust settled, the toll was unimaginable. 10 lives lost, including the little girl in the stroller. More than 70 people injured, some forever changed. Melissa Cronin was one of them. Thrown to the ground, her pelvis shattered, spleen damaged, head injured. She would later write that even years afterward, her body would tense and her heart would race any time she stepped into a crowd. Emergency crews worked desperately, lifting Weller's car off survivors with the help of bystanders. News helicopters hovered above, capturing the grim scene. The destruction, the heartbreak, the stunned faces of those who had witnessed the unimaginable. Weller was taken to the hospital. Tests showed no alcohol, no drugs. He told investigators he'd hit the gas instead of the brake and panicked when he realized his mistake. His lawyer issued a statement. The family was devastated, deeply sorry. But the damage was done, and the sorrow rippled through the city. There were no immediate arrests. Police said Weller posed no flight risk. He walked with a cane. Investigators combed through his medical records, examined the Buick, looked for anything that might explain what went so wrong. There was no mechanical failure, no clear warning, just one terrible error that cost so many lives. The lawsuits came, more than 30 in total. By 2008, Santa Monica had paid $21 million to victims and families, and while Weller was never criminally charged, many were left asking how a man his age, with declining abilities, still held a license. The city installed stronger barriers at the market, $219,000 worth of reinforced protection, too late for those lost. A warning from a police officer 3 years earlier about the market's vulnerabilities had gone unheeded. The price of that delay was now clear. George Weller spent his final years under full-time care, passing away in 2010 at age 94. The crash wasn't an act of malice, but for the families who lost mothers, fathers, children, for the survivors who still carry the scars, the consequences were permanent. It was October 15th, 2021, a crisp autumn evening in the quiet beachside village of Kavahe, Albania. The kind of place where the ocean hums in the background and travelers check into 5-star hotels to escape the chaos of the outside world. That night, a Russian family walked into the Gloria Palace Hotel. Sergei Boronov, 60 years old, his wife Natalia, 58, their 31-year-old daughter Katya, and her partner Nikita, 37. They were seasoned travelers, the kind of family that posed for smiling photos in airports and beachfront resorts, sharing glimpses of their life abroad. To them, this was supposed to be just another memory, a calm week of relaxation by the sea. But instead, it became their last. Within a single hour of arriving, all 4 of them would be found dead. After check-in, they went straight to the hotel's sauna and wellness center, a place marketed as the height of peace and luxury. They ordered drinks and a fruit platter. The waiter who brought their order said he called out to them, but no one answered. At first, he thought they were simply enjoying themselves in the sauna. Then he stepped inside. What he saw didn't make sense. All 4 of them had collapsed. 1 was sprawled on a sunbed. 2 were lying motionless on the benches. The 4th had his feet still dipped in the pool, as if frozen mid-relaxation. There were no signs of pain, no screams, no broken glass or overturned chairs, no attempt to flee. It was as if life had been stolen from them in complete silence. At 10:20 p.m., police arrived and confirmed the worst. Every single one of them was gone. Theories began immediately, but none fit. The first suggestion was asphyxia, the body being starved of oxygen, maybe a ventilation failure in the sauna. But inspectors said the ventilation system was intact. Others whispered about chlorine from the nearby pool, a chemical that can kill if inhaled in high amounts. But tests showed chlorine levels were normal. Some wondered if they'd been poisoned through food, drinks, or alcohol. But the fruit platter was untouched. The drinks were still sealed, and reports confirmed the family rarely drank at all. Nothing lined up. The Russian embassy denied chlorine was the cause. Albanian and Russian investigators tested every detail. No leaks, no faulty equipment, no damaged infrastructure, no suspicious fingerprints. The pool water, perfectly normal. The air quality, clear. The sauna systems, all working. And still, 4 healthy adults had died in less than an hour, with no warning, no struggle, no sound. Even more unsettling was the calmness of the scene. It looked like they had simply slipped away. Experts say certain gases can cause immediate unconsciousness, fast, silent, deadly, but no trace of such gases was found. No fire, no carbon monoxide, nothing. For locals and fellow tourists, fear spread quickly. If something like this could happen in one of the most prestigious, safest resorts in Albania, what did that mean for anyone traveling abroad? The hotel tried to reassure guests, calling it a tragedy, an unexplained event. But behind closed doors, prosecutors began quietly wondering if foul play had been involved. The problem? No evidence, no suspects, no motive. And yet, the strangeness of the case, the speed, the silence, the total absence of warning signs, made many feel like something more sinister had unfolded that night. The family had barely even begun their holiday. They hadn't unpacked, hadn't tasted their welcome platter, hadn't even made it past their first evening. One moment they were alive, relaxing together. The next, their bodies were being carried out of a luxury hotel, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. And here's the most disturbing part. Years later, those questions remain unanswered. The official cause of death has never been confirmed. The case remains open. The Gloria Palace Hotel continues to operate, but the haunting mystery of that night lingers in the air like a shadow no one can shake. So the question remains, how can 4 people walk into one of the safest spas in Europe and never walk out?
Trevin Joslin's mother Hannah arriving at the hearing with a hug for the teacher at the centre of the tragedy.
Shirley Naseby, who was running the gym class, said Trevin was enthusiastic and very confident, one of the better gymnasts in the group.
She was only 12, bright, joyful, full of spark, the kind of girl who walked into a room and made it warmer without even trying. Trevin Hope Joslin wasn't just a student at Taverham High School in Norfolk, she was a presence, confident, kind, one of the better gymnasts in her class. No one expected that an ordinary day in gym class would be her last. It was March 12th, 2014. Just another PE session. A basic gymnastics lesson. Nothing extreme, nothing dangerous. Just kids being kids. Laughing, running, stretching across mats and equipment under the soft echo of bouncing sneakers in the school gym. Near the end of the class, students were allowed to pick their favorite apparatus. Trevin, ever eager, chose the pommel horse. She'd already done a few successful vaults. Everything looked fine. She ran up like she'd done a dozen times before. Graceful, determined. But this time, just as she leapt, her right foot caught the edge of the horse. It was a fraction of a second, a tiny misstep, but it was enough. Trevin tumbled forward, face down, hitting the mat hard. At first, it didn't look like a catastrophe. She landed almost in a recovery position. Students gathered. A few thought she'd just been winded. But as she lay there trying to move her lips, barely able to form words, the fear began to set in. Something wasn't right. The PE teacher rushed over. Staff called for help. The school's pastoral care supervisor, Lynn Hammond, began CPR. Everyone was trying, praying that it wasn't as bad as it looked. "You just want to believe a child is still breathing," Hammond later said, her voice shaking from the memory. But even as Trevin was rushed to Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, reality was already spiraling out of reach. Doctors confirmed what no one wanted to hear: a catastrophic hyperextension injury to the neck. Her spinal cord had been severely damaged. She fought for a week, but on March 19, 2014, Trevin died. A bright young life extinguished, just like that. It wasn't supposed to happen. She was healthy, strong, but during the inquest, it came out that Trevin had a pre-existing neck condition, something that could have limited her ability to safely participate in high-impact sports like gymnastics. The school was aware of it, but somewhere someone missed a step. Due to an administrative oversight, not all staff had been told. Still, it wasn't negligence. It wasn't carelessness. Investigators found no evidence of wrongdoing, and chillingly, the injury she suffered would have been fatal, even in someone with a perfectly normal neck. No one was at fault, but that didn't make it any less tragic. The assistant head teacher who led the class, Shirley Naseby, remembered Trevin with tears and affection. She was confident, enthusiastic, one of the better gymnasts in the class. The last time she saw Trevin whole, she was smiling mid-run, ready to vault toward her future. And then, it was gone. Her parents didn't speak to the media after the inquest. How could they? What words could possibly exist for that kind of loss? But the school tried to keep her memory alive. A quiet garden was built in the school grounds, a cherry tree planted in her name. Head teacher Peter Ware said students and teachers still talk about her with warmth. She always had a smile on her face, he said, eyes lowered. She will be remembered with great fondness. In the end, Trevin's death was ruled accidental. But for anyone who's ever sent a child off to school believing they're safe, it didn't feel like just an accident. It felt like a hole ripped open in the fabric of an ordinary day, one that would never quite close. It was May 30, 2025, in northern Namibia. Bernd Kebbel, a 59-year-old German-born businessman and devoted conservationist, had come not as a tourist, but as someone who'd spent years protecting one of nature's rarest wonders, Namibia's desert-adapted lions. This was sacred ground to him. He wasn't alone. His wife, Connie, 57, was by his side, along with friends and 6 children. They traveled in 3 four-wheel drives, each with rooftop tents meant to keep them safe from predators. That night, they set up camp near the Hwaneb Skeleton Coast, a final frontier for the desert lions. The stars were bright, the silence deep. It felt like the perfect end to a long day, but death was close. Around 1:30 a.m., Bernd climbed down from the tent to use the toilet. A routine moment, but just feet away, hidden in the dark, a lioness was waiting. Her name was Charlie. She was 12, old, skeletal, starving. Her ribs stuck out like bones through paper. Once featured in wildlife documentaries, Charlie had grown desperate and had lost her fear of humans. The moment Bernd touched the ground, she pounced. Her jaws sank into his neck. She dragged him into the brush. It happened so fast, so silently, no one noticed, until Connie woke to strange sounds. Then she heard her husband's voice, faint and terrified, followed by a growl. She scrambled down the ladder. In the dark, she saw it, Charlie dragging Bernd's lifeless body away. Without hesitation, Connie ran toward the lioness. She grabbed a metal pole and began striking her. She screamed, fought, and even tried to rip off Charlie's leather tracking collar. Another camper arrived and hit the lioness with a flashlight. Finally, Charlie backed off into the dark, but it was too late. Bernd had died almost instantly. The camp was paralyzed with fear. No one slept. The children cried. Adults sat in shock. And then, Charlie came back. She circled the vehicles, growling, pretending to charge. The group huddled inside, afraid to move. The next night, Charlie struck again, this time at a nearby camp. She shredded a tent, clawing and biting through it. Footage later showed the damage. She wasn't just hungry, she had become a threat. Namibia's Ministry of Environment launched an investigation. On June 1st, just 2 days later, they found Charlie resting under a bush. She was put down that morning. Connie later spoke publicly. She said they had come to terms with it, that she and Bernd never wanted Charlie to die. They had loved this land too deeply, but the wild had turned against them. Locals called Connie a hero, a woman who ran at a lioness and lived. A safari guide who knew them said, few people could face a lion and survive, but Connie did. Only around 60 desert-adapted lions remain in Cunene, fewer than 800 across Namibia. Their habitat is vanishing, their prey disappearing. And when desperation sets in, even sacred ground becomes deadly. Bernd had spent years trying to protect that balance. He funded conservation teams, supported researchers like Dr. Philip Flip Stander, and even had a lion named Kebbel in his honor, though it too had to be put down for safety. He also owned the off-road center in Windhoek, supplying safari gear and supporting ecotourism. After the tragedy, his children, Dear and Heidi, returned from South Africa to be with their mother. Authorities confirmed Byrne's death. Campers had tried to help, but it happened too fast. Namibia lost a protector, the desert lost a lioness, and Connie, she lost her partner in the very place he loved most.
Celebrating her 21st birthday, killed in a horrific one-car crash on the Williamsburg Bridge. The man behind the wheel, a city traffic agent. He is now charged with DWI in the death of Amanda Miner.
It was March 16, 2017 in New York City. Amanda Miner had just turned 21. She was home in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, taking a break from Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, where she was studying to become a social worker. That evening, she celebrated her milestone birthday the way so many young people do, surrounded by family, taking in the Broadway show Wicked, sharing dinner, and later meeting friends in Manhattan. But Amanda never made it home. At around 3:15 a.m., she climbed into the back seat of a gray Infiniti G37, thinking she was in safe hands. Behind the wheel was 26-year-old Stephen Hoy, an off-duty NYPD traffic enforcement agent. In the passenger seat sat his colleague, 24-year-old Michael Camacho. Amanda trusted them. She believed she was simply catching a ride back to Brooklyn after a night of celebrating. What she didn't know was that Hoy had been drinking heavily, 8 shots of vodka and 2 mixed drinks. His blood alcohol level was 0.12, far above the legal limit. Worse, he wasn't just drunk, he was reckless. On the Williamsburg Bridge, where the speed limit is just 35 miles per hour, Hoy pushed the Infiniti to a staggering 111 miles per hour. The car roared through the night, headlights blurring, the city racing by in a haze. And then, in an instant, everything shattered. Hoy lost control. The car slammed into a divider, then smashed into a support pillar with such force that the vehicle ripped apart, splitting into pieces like paper under a blade. Amanda, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was thrown from the wreckage. The impact was catastrophic. Emergency crews arrived quickly, but it was already too late. Amanda was declared dead at the scene. Just hours before, she had been alive, joyful, and full of plans. Now her family was waking up to their worst nightmare. Amanda's mother, Virginia Cabrera Miner, stood outside their Brooklyn home in disbelief. Just the night before, she had celebrated her daughter's 21st birthday. Now she was telling reporters through tears, "She's gone. She was a wonderful girl, my youngest. We just celebrated her birthday, and now I'll never see her graduate." Her professors remembered her as a student who radiated kindness. Friends described her as driven and compassionate. When the case went to court, Amanda's older sister Linda broke down. She told the judge, "I am completely heartbroken. I no longer have a sister, I just want to be with my sister." Her father, Jeffrey, stood holding a photo of Amanda, pleading with Hoy to carry forward the positive energy Amanda had given to others. The pain in that courtroom was unbearable, grief filling every word spoken by a family who would never see Amanda again. Hoy tried to explain himself. At the scene of the crash, he lied to police, claiming he'd only had 2 drinks. But prosecutors uncovered the truth. He had been drinking heavily all night. Eventually, he pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter and vehicular manslaughter. He avoided a full trial, but he couldn't avoid prison. The judge sentenced him to 4 to 12 years. In court, Hoy said, "I'm very sorry. I hope her family can forgive me. We were celebrating her birthday and it was a traffic accident." But Amanda's family pushed back. She was not celebrating with him. She had trusted him, trusted that he would get her home safely. Instead, his recklessness had destroyed her future. Even as Hoy's mother insisted her son was a good man, a father to his 5-year-old daughter, and not a heavy drinker, Judge Melissa Jackson made it clear. "You will serve time," she told him, "but your punishment will also be living with what you did. That will stay with you forever." It was August 15, 2001, in Deva, Romania, the heart of the country's gymnastics empire. The same gym that had produced legends. Inside, 12-year-old Alexandra Hucci trained quietly, her tiny frame, just 55 pounds, moving through familiar drills. She was supposed to be taking it easy, nursing a sore wrist that kept her from full routines. But everyone knew Alexandra was different. She had that spark, that rare presence coaches whispered about when no one else was listening. Romania had seen many prodigies before her, but there was something about this girl. That morning looked like any other. No falls, no stumbles, no warning signs. Alexandra climbed from the pit, approached her coach, Liliana Cosma, and spoke so softly she had to lean in to hear. "I need to go to the restroom," she said. Minutes later, she came back pale, trembling. "I can't continue," she whispered. She had just thrown up. Her coach didn't hesitate. Straight to the school doctor. Alexandra was still conscious then. At least that's what the physician believed. But the nurse who rode in the ambulance would later insist otherwise. She was already in a coma when we arrived, she said, still shaken. We asked if she had fallen. They said no. This wasn't a crash. This wasn't an accident on the beam or vault. It was something darker, something happening inside her own body. From the pediatric hospital in Deva to the county ICU, and finally, airlifted to Timisoara's neurosurgery unit, Alexandra was passed from one desperate team of doctors to another. For 5 days, machines kept her breathing as Romania held its breath too. News bulletins showed her face, delicate, serious, almost too young for the weight she carried. Flowers and religious icons piled up at the hospital doors. Strangers prayed for a child they had never met. The truth was cruel. It wasn't gymnastics. It wasn't overwork or injury. Alexandra had been carrying a hidden time bomb from birth, a congenital malformation of blood vessels deep in her brain. That morning, it burst. A sudden hemorrhage flooded her brain with blood, sending her into a third-degree coma. No fall, no warning, just a quiet collapse into the arms of fate. Back home in a poor village near Falticeni, her parents didn't even know yet. They had no phone. By the time the news reached them, their daughter was already clinging to life by wires and machines. Alexandra had begun gymnastics at 6 years old, chasing the shadow of her idols who had won gold in Sydney the year before. She had already claimed a national title for her age group. When reporters asked what she wanted most, her answer was steady, almost solemn. The Olympics. I have no time for friends, but I like the gym. She was 12, and speaking like someone who had already traded childhood for destiny. But destiny betrayed her. On August 20th, after 5 silent days, Alexandra was gone. There was no dramatic fall, no crash echoing across the gym, only a whisper to her coach, a pale face, and the quiet unraveling of a dream the world never got to see. To this day, her name is spoken softly in Romanian gymnastics circles, a reminder of how fragile even the brightest sparks can be.
Family are mourning the death of a 22-year-old woman who died on the job late last week. Lauren Block worked at Christie's Cabaret in Cleveland and fell 15 feet while working.
January 2nd, 2013. Just another cold winter night in Cleveland. For 22-year-old Lauren Block, it was supposed to be routine. Another shift at Christie's Cabaret, a job she'd done so many times before. She showed up like she always did, likely flashing that same warm smile. The one everyone remembered. She had that kind of energy, the kind that fills even the darkest corners of a room. Long black hair, laughter that stuck with you, a future still wide open. She had no idea her life was about to end. Upstairs, in one of the private dance areas, Lauren was with a customer named Pasquale Starino. It was a lap dance, standard, transactional, just another night. But then something changed. Maybe she wanted to impress. Maybe it was spontaneous. Maybe she'd done it before. Lauren reached for a railing, possibly attempting a move, a flip, a spin, something risky. Then it all went wrong. In one horrifying moment, she lost her grip. Her body lurched forward, and just like that, she was airborne. She fell, 15 feet, head first, over the edge of the balcony, straight to the unforgiving floor below. The sound must have stopped everything. Music, voices, movement, replaced with stunned silence. Screams, panic. When first responders arrived, Lauren was lying crumpled on the ground, bleeding, unconscious. Her skull had taken the full impact. The damage was devastating. She was rushed to Metro Health Medical Center, barely clinging to life. Word spread fast. A dancer fell? Off the balcony? How? Why? Whispers turned to theories. One witness said he saw 2 men bolt from the scene right after the fall. Who were they? Why did they run? No one knew. Surveillance cameras didn't offer much clarity. Police didn't treat it as a crime. They called it a tragic accident. But not everyone agreed. Danielle Edwards, a former dancer who had worked with Lauren, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She knew that balcony, knew the space, knew how hard it would be, even in 6-inch heels, to accidentally go over. The railing, she said, was high, too high. She wasn't the only one asking questions. OSHA opened an investigation. They looked at the layout, the balcony height, the spacing between the furniture and the edge, but no answer, no report could change what happened next. Lauren fought for a week. 7 days of machines and beeping monitors, of her family sitting beside her, waiting for a miracle, praying, hoping, clinging to her hand, willing her to stay. But her injuries were too severe. On January 9th, Lauren Block was pronounced dead. She was 22. Just like that, the light she carried vanished. A daughter, a sister, a friend, gone. The people who loved her were left staring at a void. Something so sudden, so violent, so impossible to understand. Christie's Cabaret said nothing. No press release, no apology, no words at all. Just silence, as if her life was just another shift and another night. But even in death, Lauren gave. She was an organ donor, a part of her lives on now, in the bodies of strangers who will never know her smile, but who carry pieces of her beating inside them. She died alone on a cold floor, but she saved lives. That was the kind of person she was, and that should have never been her ending.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second, altitude 9 nautical miles, downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
It was the morning of January 28, 1986. A biting chill clung to the air at Kennedy Space Center as the Space Shuttle Challenger stood poised on Launch Pad 39B, gleaming white against a flawless blue sky. To the thousands gathered below, and the millions watching live on television, it was a moment of hope, pride, and wonder. But to a handful of engineers watching from afar, it was a ticking time bomb. Inside the shuttle sat 7 astronauts, ordinary people made extraordinary by courage. Commander Francis Dick Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, mission specialists Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, and Ellison Onizuka, payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire. She was to be the first civilian in space, the face of NASA's new Teacher in Space program. For once, space didn't just belong to scientists, it belonged to the classroom, to every kid watching at home. But beneath the excitement, there was unease. The night before, the temperature had plunged to 18 degrees, the coldest weather ever for a shuttle launch. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the company responsible for the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, were terrified. They warned NASA that the O-ring seal's rubber rings meant to contain searing hot gas inside the boosters might become too brittle to work in such cold. If they failed, those gases could escape and burn straight through the rocket. 2 engineers, Roger Boisjoli and Alan McDonald, pleaded to delay the launch. They argued, shouted, even begged, but NASA managers were under immense political pressure. The launch had already been delayed several times, and the media mocked the agency for hesitating. Executives wanted success, not caution, and in the end, the engineers were overruled. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger's engines ignited. The ground trembled. The shuttle rose majestically into the sky, trailing white fire and hope. McAuliffe's students cheered in classrooms across America. The families waved proudly. For 59 seconds, everything seemed perfect. Then, a small tongue of orange flame appeared on the side of the right booster, invisible to the naked eye, but captured by high-speed cameras. It flickered at first, then grew as hot gases burned through the metal casing and scorched the external fuel tank. The O-ring had failed exactly as the engineers predicted. At 72 seconds into flight, Challenger was 48,000 feet high, moving at nearly twice the speed of sound. The flame sliced through a support strut holding the booster in place. The external tank ruptured, releasing a storm of liquid hydrogen and oxygen, a deadly mix that ignited in an instant. At 11:39:13 a.m., a white bloom of fire spread across the sky. The crowd gasped, then screamed. Pieces of the shuttle spiraled outward, the boosters tumbling wildly, the orbiter vanishing into the explosion. But the truth came later. The crew wasn't killed instantly. The crew cabin had survived the explosion intact, hurtling through the sky on a doomed arc. Inside, the astronauts were conscious, oxygen systems automatically activated. One of the last recorded transmissions came from pilot Michael Smith, his calm voice breaking the silence with 2 words, "I-O." For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, the cabin plummeted toward the Atlantic. Over 12 miles, no control, no parachutes, just gravity and silence. Investigators later determined that at least 3 of the astronauts had manually activated their emergency air packs. That means for part of that fall, they were awake. They knew. The cabin hit the ocean at over 200 miles per hour, 18 miles off the coast of Florida. The impact shattered everything. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but there were no survivors. NASA went silent. America was in shock. Schools turned off their televisions. Reporters struggled for words. That night, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. For 32 months, NASA grounded the shuttle program. A presidential inquiry, the Rogers Commission, found the cause, the O-ring failure, triggered by cold, ignored warnings, and a culture of silence. The design of the solid rocket boosters was completely overhauled, with new seals and heaters to prevent another catastrophe. When divers recovered the wreckage, they found the crew cabin buried on the ocean floor. The evidence told a story of humans who did everything right and a system that failed them. They found 3 air packs manually switched on, proof of defiance even in death. Challenger was supposed to be a celebration, a symbol that space belonged to everyone. Instead, it became a monument to tragedy and a reminder of what happens when ambition outruns caution. The teacher in space never got to teach her lesson, but the world learned one instead, written in fire across the Florida sky. It was June 28, 2024, in Deer Park, Long Island. At Hawaii Nail and Spa, everyone was unaware that in just moments, their lives would change forever. Among them sat 30-year-old NYPD officer Amelia Renhack. She wasn't in uniform that day. Amelia had joined the force in 2018, proudly serving in the 102nd Precinct in Queens. Her husband, Detective Carl Renhack, also wore the badge. They had only been married since September. Amelia never made it to that wedding. At exactly 4:30 p.m., everything shattered. A 2020 Chevy Traverse came flying off the road like a missile. The SUV ripped through the parking lot, accelerator nearly to the floor, the engine roaring at 78 miles per hour, far past the legal limit. Then came the sound. Glass exploding, metal crushing, screams slicing through the chaos. 4 people were killed instantly. Amelia was one of them. Alongside her, 37-year-old salon owner Jan Kai Ken Chen, 41-year-old employee Yan Shu, and 50-year-old worker Maisie Zhang lost their lives. 9 others were badly hurt, including a 12-year-old girl who had simply come for a haircut. In the wreckage, amid shattered mirrors and pools of blood, the smell of alcohol lingered. Later, investigators pieced together the driver's movements that day. His name was Stephen Schwally, 64 years old. That morning at 11 a.m., he walked into a liquor store and bought 2 bottles of Montebello Long Island iced tea, a powerful pre-mixed drink. The cashier recognized him. Schwally was a regular, buying the same bottles almost daily. Hours before the crash, he was seen swerving across Deer Park, speeding recklessly, nearly mowing down pedestrians. Inside his SUV, police found the empty bottles. In his hotel room, they discovered another, unopened one waiting for him. And when officers asked him about the people he had just killed, his response was chilling. He didn't ask about them. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he said, "I haven't broken any laws. Can I get my license back? I'm a Marine." His blood alcohol level was 0.17, more than double the legal limit. And this wasn't the first time. In 2013, he had been arrested for crashing into a mailbox and later found asleep in his car with the engine running. His own brother admitted Stephen had been drinking and driving for years, often refusing breath tests, often brushing off consequences. "It's like my worst nightmare come true," he said. "I feel terrible about innocent people getting hurt." On August the 1st, 2024, Schwally stood in a courtroom facing a 38-count indictment, second-degree manslaughter, aggravated vehicular homicide, reckless driving, and more. He pleaded not guilty. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. In the courtroom sat Detective Carl Renhack. As the charges were read aloud, he broke down, tears streaming for the wife he had just married, the life they were supposed to build together now stolen forever. Other families sat beside him, their grief heavy in the air. John Kai Chen left behind his wife and 2 children. Yan Shu had been working tirelessly to support her sick mother and young son back in China. Maisie Zhang never even had a chance to react. Online, the outrage grew. People demanded justice, insisting Schwally should never walk free again. Suffolk County's district attorney said it best. This man had shown no concern for public safety, and NYPD Commissioner Edward Caban mourned not only for Amelia, but for every innocent life taken that day. It was a bright afternoon, August 4th, 2022, in Windsor Hills, Los Angeles. The clock had just passed 1:30 p.m. The intersection at La Brea and Slauson bustled with cars, buses, and people. Among them was 23-year-old Ashery Ryan behind the wheel of her silver Jaguar. She wasn't alone. Beside her sat her boyfriend, 24-year-old Reynold Lester. In the back, their 11-month-old son Alonzo cooed softly. And Ashery was pregnant again, eager to meet the baby boy they had already named Armani. They were on their way to a prenatal appointment. Out of nowhere, tearing through the street like a missile, came a black Mercedes-Benz. Witnesses barely had time to register what they were seeing before disaster struck. Behind the wheel was 37-year-old Nicole Lorraine Linton, a traveling nurse from Texas. She wasn't slowing down. She wasn't braking. Her car was moving at 130 miles per hour on a road with a 35 miles per hour limit. And the light had been red for 15 seconds. What happened next was captured by surveillance footage too horrific to forget. Nicole's car blasted through the intersection and slammed into Ashery's Jaguar with such brutal force that the car was torn in half. The impact set off a fiery chain reaction. Flames erupted, spreading across the intersection, swallowing car after car. 9 vehicles were caught in the hellish blaze. The roar of the fire, the explosion of gas tanks, the shattering of glass. It was chaos. One witness said it was as if a black cloud had swallowed the intersection. Another described the sound, like a bomb going off. Ashery, Reynold, little Alonzo, and baby Armani, not yet born. They died instantly, gone in the blink of an eye. 2 more lives were lost that day. 43-year-old Nathsha Lewis and 38-year-old Lynette Noble, women who'd simply been on their way to the mall, their ordinary plans ending in unthinkable tragedy. In less than 5 seconds, 6 lives were stolen. And Nicole? She survived, bruised, burned, but alive. First responders pulled her from the wreckage and placed her in handcuffs at the scene. She's been behind bars ever since. The charges? 6 counts of murder, 6 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter. If convicted, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. As investigators pieced together what happened, chilling details emerged. Data from Nicole's car showed she had floored the gas pedal for 5 full seconds before impact, pushing from 122 miles per hour to 130 miles per hour at the moment she struck. The road had curves. She was steering, not unconscious, not frozen. Prosecutors argued she knew what she was doing, or at least enough to have stopped. Nicole's defense told another story. They claimed she suffered a sudden medical episode, something that made her disconnect from reality, that she wasn't truly in control. But the questions kept piling up. Why had she searched online just days before? Can you see your death coming? Why had she called her sister 4 minutes before the crash, anxious and rambling, sounding lost? Her family spoke out. Nicole's sister described a kind woman battling inner demons, a nurse dedicated to helping others, yet fighting a long, painful struggle with mental illness. But for the victims' families, none of that could explain away the devastation. None of it could bring back what was lost. A year later, on August 4th, 2023, the community gathered at the spot where the lives were stolen. The Slauson 6 Memorial was unveiled. Flowers, a bench, a small garden. Photos of the victims, including an ultrasound of tiny Armani, were placed with care. 6 doves were released, 1 for each soul lost in that blaze. And as the doves flew, those left behind asked the same question. How could this have happened?
This was sentencing day for the woman accused of killing her sister and 5 other people in a wrong-way drunk driving crash.
It was the early morning of February 9th, 2014, in Diamond Bar, California. 21-year-old Olivia Carolee Culbreth, a young mother from Fontana, had given birth just 11 days earlier. But instead of being home with her newborn, she made a choice that would end in one of the most devastating wrong-way crashes California had ever seen. At around 4:40 a.m., Olivia climbed into a red Chevrolet Camaro after a night of drinking. Witnesses soon began flooding 911 with calls. A red Camaro was spotted tearing north in the southbound lanes of the 57 freeway, flying at more than 100 miles per hour. Minutes later, it was seen again, this time on the 60 freeway, heading east in the westbound lanes. One caller warned desperately, "Something terrible is about to happen." And they were right. Moments later, Olivia's Camaro slammed head-on into a red Ford Explorer. The impact was catastrophic. Both vehicles were obliterated in an instant. Inside the Explorer was a family of 4. 47-year-old Gregorio Mejia Martinez, his wife, 42-year-old Leticia Ibarra, their 20-year-old daughter, Jessica Jasmine, and Jessica's grandmother, 80-year-old Esther Delgado. None of them survived. In Olivia's car, her sister, 24-year-old Maya Louise, and her friend, 21-year-old Kristen Melissa Young, were killed instantly as well. Olivia was the only one left alive. Nearby, another driver, 57-year-old Joel Cortez, was caught in the chain of destruction. His Ford Freestyle was struck, forcing him into the divider. Dazed and bleeding, he watched the horror unfold. Wreckage scattered across the freeway, bodies lifeless on the asphalt. Believing he wouldn't survive, he called his children to say goodbye. By some miracle, he did. Olivia, broken and battered, was pulled from the Camaro and rushed to the hospital. As word spread, shock rippled across California. How could a young mother, less than 2 weeks after giving birth, be behind the wheel that night? Investigators quickly uncovered the truth. Her blood alcohol level was 0.15%, nearly twice the legal limit. A 24-ounce beer can was still in the wreckage. Surveillance footage showed her drinking earlier at a Fullerton bar, and this wasn't her first brush with disaster. At 17, she had already been convicted of DUI after crashing into a pole. Her license had been suspended more than once. In fact, just days before this crash, it had been reinstated, with warnings that another violation could lead to murder charges. Those warnings came true. Olivia was charged with 6 counts of second-degree murder. Court delays stretched the pain for years. Finally, in May 2018, she stood before the judge and pleaded no contest. Even Olivia's own mother spoke, describing her daughter as someone who once cared deeply for others, now reduced to raising her infant son through prison visits. Olivia herself often asked the same haunting question, "Why did I survive?" But apologies weren't enough. The judge rejected any plea for leniency, sentencing her to 30 years to life, 5 years for each life lost. She won't be eligible for parole for 25 years. The prosecutor reminded the court that while Olivia spoke of remorse, her defense at times tried to shift blame. Outside, Kristen Young's mother said bluntly, she knew she was over the limit. She just didn't think anything would happen.
2 British men and their Russian guide died while on a fishing expedition in Russia's Murmansk region on Sunday morning after being struck by their helicopter's rotor.
It was Sunday morning in 2013, deep within the Arctic Circle. Eurocopter EC-120 descended toward the frozen wilderness of Russia's remote Kola Peninsula. This wasn't just any destination. It was a secret haven for the world's wealthiest fishermen, where people paid thousands to cast lines into pristine rivers under untouched skies. On board were 3 men: Rupert Beaumont, a 69-year-old retired London lawyer, Mark Robertson, also 69, a fine art dealer, and their 53-year-old Russian guide, Alexander Tushnikov, an experienced Arctic expedition leader. For Rupert and Mark, this was the trip of a lifetime. Rupert, once a key figure in the Barings Bank scandal fallout, had traded courtrooms for calm waters. His son, James, was flying just behind them in a second helicopter. Everything had been meticulously arranged. The Eurocopter was chosen for its modern safety features. It was June, peak salmon season. Conditions were ideal. But the Arctic doesn't care for perfect plans. The pilot, Alexander Shabalin, a 25-year veteran, began descent near the Rinda River, beside a high-end fishing lodge. The terrain looked stable. It wasn't. As the skids touched down, one wheel sank into the marsh. The aircraft tipped sharply. Rotor blades, still spinning, dropped low, too low. In a blink, the unthinkable happened. Rupert, Mark, and Alexander had just stepped out, likely stretching their legs. Then the blade swept through them. There was no time to react. All 3 died instantly. From above, James watched it happen. The sudden tip, the chaos, the silence that followed. His father was gone before he even landed. Photos later showed the helicopter crumpled on its side, rotors twisted and bloodied, white snow stained red. The peaceful camp transformed in an instant. The pilot survived with minor injuries and radioed for help, but it was already too late. At first, there was talk of mechanical failure or weather, but soon focus shifted. Did the pilot misjudge the ground, try to lift off too soon? Russia's investigative committee launched a full inquiry. Conflicting witness statements and Shabalin's own account raised suspicion. A criminal case was opened. If found responsible, the pilot faced up to 10 years in prison. One report suggested the victims were struck not while landing, but during an attempted takeoff. Either way, the soft ground had betrayed them. Rupert wasn't just a vacationer. He was a revered legal mind. Friends called him sharp, kind, and generous. Mark was a quiet but respected figure in the art world. Their guide, Alexander, was beloved in the fishing community and trusted by international travelers. And then, all 3 were gone. The British Foreign Office confirmed the deaths. Rupert's wife, Susie, flew from Australia to Russia to be with their son. The grief was immeasurable. The Kola Peninsula had become a go-to destination for elite anglers. Remote, pristine, and only reachable by air. But that same remoteness came with risk. On that Arctic morning, in a place meant to offer peace, 3 lives were erased by a single misstep.
You're good. We're good. We're good. They're just going to be coming this way. They're just going to be coming this way.
In the early hours of October 15th, 2023, chaos exploded outside a pole dancing studio nestled in Manhattan's Flatiron district. Screams pierced the night as people fled the scene. Some half naked, others desperate to escape a nightmare unfolding inside. Amid the panic, a man named Stephen Mington lay dead. Stephen wasn't just any man. He was a Harlem resident with a troubled past that haunted him like a shadow. Earlier that year, he'd been convicted on federal bank fraud charges, and before that, had brushes with the law over substance distribution. Yet, those who knew him spoke of a different side, a man trying to turn his life around, a man they called good despite the mistakes. But Stephen's final moments were sealed in a place where darkness thrived beneath the surface. By day, Foxy Fitness and Pole Training Studio appeared innocent enough, offering pole dancing classes and fitness routines. But when the sun dipped below the skyline, the studio shed its daytime guise and transformed into a den of unregulated chaos. Loud music thumped through the walls, underage drinking flowed freely, and illicit activities painted a dangerous picture far removed from the studio's official purpose. Neighbors had been sounding alarms for months. Complaints flooded in about noise, illegal drinking, and shady after-hours parties. Police had visited before, issuing warnings and citations, but nothing stopped the studio from continuing its dangerous double life. That fateful night, the simmering tension finally boiled over. Details are still murky, but during one of these illicit gatherings, a violent dispute erupted. In the blink of an eye, a gunshot rang out. Stephen Mington was struck in the head, collapsing in the dimly lit stairwell where the remnants of the party still flickered. Strobe lights pulsing, a stripper pole looming nearby. Witnesses described a scene torn apart by panic, people running, stumbling, some half-dressed, desperate to vanish from the nightmare they'd just witnessed. Police arrived swiftly, but the damage was done. Stephen was pronounced dead at the scene, his life extinguished in a place where danger had long lurked unnoticed. The building's history was a testament to the blurred lines between fun and felony. Months of violations, countless complaints, and a blatant disregard for permits had turned Foxy Fitness into a ticking time bomb. Yet, despite the warnings, no decisive action had been taken to shut down the operation. Now, the investigation drags on. No arrests have been made. The suspect remains at large. Police question those who attended that deadly party, but many remain tight-lipped, wrapped in the same silence that shrouds the truth. Stephen's criminal record and the shadowy nature of the party have led some to speculate the shooting was connected to his past, but no clear motive has emerged. This tragic night stands as a stark warning, a reminder of the danger lurking where regulation ends and recklessness begins. In places where the line between entertainment and crime blurs, lives can be shattered in an instant, leaving behind echoes of grief, unanswered questions, and a haunting sense of loss. It was the early morning of January 12th, 2025, in Castleford, West Yorkshire. The temperature had dropped to a brutal -5 degrees Celsius, and the roads were glazed in ice, turning every turn into a risk. In the quiet of dawn, when most people were still asleep, 18-year-old Taylor Lupton was riding in the passenger seat of a white Volkswagen Golf. It was just after 6:20 a.m., a time when the world should still feel calm, but for Taylor, everything was about to change forever. Taylor wasn't just another young man. He had recently become a father, a boy from nearby Pontefract who was described as the kind of soul who could light up any room. Friends called him crazy sweet, a mix of energy, humor, and kindness. He had his whole life in front of him. But that morning, as he sat beside two 21-year-olds, a man and a woman, none of them could have known what the next few minutes would hold. They were driving down Weldon Road, a stretch locals had long whispered about, calling it cursed and dangerous. The car moved across a junction, but then something went horribly wrong. Witnesses said it was sudden, as if the vehicle had been yanked out of control by invisible hands. The Golf swerved violently, mounted the pavement, tore through a wire fence, and smashed into heavy bushes. The momentum didn't stop there. It slid down a steep slope, unstoppable, before plunging into the shadows of an oxidation tank at the Wallale sewage works. The tank was nearly empty, but deep enough to swallow the car from the road's view. By the time emergency crews arrived, the scene looked like a nightmare. The Volkswagen sat crumpled at the bottom, its windows shattered, one door wrenched open as if the car itself had screamed. Just yards away, they found Taylor's body. His two companions were pulled out alive and rushed to the hospital. But for Taylor, there was no saving him. Shock turned to anger when it was revealed the two survivors were arrested for suspected involvement in dangerous driving that may have caused Taylor's death. Locals stood in disbelief. One man recalled how you couldn't even see the car from the road. Another, 66-year-old Richard Iverson, said he'd seen crashes there before and had always feared that bend. That morning, he spotted a license plate lying on the footpath. He thought it was nothing more than a petty theft, only later realizing it was a clue to a much darker tragedy. As news spread, grief spilled out onto social media. Taylor's girlfriend, Megan, poured out her heart in a post that shattered those who read it. "You were my world. You made me better. I love you so much. I wish this wasn't real. I'll carry you in my heart forever." Friends wrote tributes filled with disbelief and sorrow. "Rest in peace, Taylor Lupton, you crazy sweet soul," Kira Reed said. "Just hours before, you were smiling, dancing, happy." Another friend added, "You were amazing, Tay. Never a dull moment. We love you." Soon, the crash site became a place of mourning. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes covered the ground. A message from his great-grandmother read, "To my lovely great-grandson, Taylor, taken too soon." His parents left a note that simply said, "Love you so much, Mom and Dad." His siblings wrote, "Going to miss you, big brother." The heartbreak in those words painted a picture of a family ripped apart, of a daughter who would grow up without her father. Police later confirmed what many had feared. The roads were slick with ice. Visibility was poor, and there were no warning signs at that stretch of road. Photos from the scene showed the car's broken path down the slope into the tank, a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be. Taylor was gone before his daughter's first birthday, before he had the chance to live the future everyone believed he was destined for. And now, the investigation continues, but no answer will ever bring him back.
The people of the Soviet Union were keen to welcome them back to Earth. But when their capsule touched down and the recovery team knocked on the door, they received no response.
It was June 6, 1971. A quiet night on the Kazakh steppe, but at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, history was preparing to roar to life once again. 3 Soviet cosmonauts, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev, climbed into their Soyuz 11 capsule, unaware they were stepping into one of the most haunting tragedies in the history of space exploration. They were national heroes, chosen to represent the Soviet Union's new frontier, Salyut 1, the world's first space station. Their mission to live and work in orbit for 3 weeks was meant to prove that humans could survive long-term in space. The launch was flawless. Within a day, Soyuz 11 docked with Salyut 1, and for the first time in history, humans entered a functioning space station. For 22 days, the crew lived hundreds of kilometers above Earth, conducting experiments, broadcasting to millions, and setting endurance records. But small problems began to surface. Smoke in the air filters, a brief electrical fire, and communication static. Still, they stayed calm and completed the mission. By June 29th, their work was done. They sealed the station, undocked, and began their return to Earth. Every system checked out, their voices steady and confident. Then, suddenly, radio silence. The capsule re-entered the atmosphere smoothly. Parachutes deployed, and at 2:17 a.m. on June 30th, it landed softly in Kazakhstan. Ground crews rushed to greet the heroes, but when they opened the hatch, their smiles vanished. All 3 cosmonauts sat motionless, their faces blue, blood at their noses and ears. There was no fire, no crash, just silence. They had suffocated in space. The investigation uncovered a horrifying truth. A tiny pressure valve, damaged during separation, had opened too early, venting the cabin into the vacuum of space. Within 15 seconds, the pressure dropped to 0. Viktor Patsayev, seated closest to the valve, had tried to close it, but he never stood a chance. In under a minute, all 3 were dead. Doctors later discovered that their blood had foamed and capillaries had burst the unmistakable signs of rapid decompression. They had become the only humans to die in space itself. The Soviet Union declared the mission a success and honored them with heroes' funerals in Red Square, their ashes laid beside Yuri Gagarin. the truth of their deaths was hidden for years, while engineers quietly redesigned the Soyuz to carry only 2 cosmonauts, allowing for pressure suits during launch and landing. When rescuers first opened the capsule, one whispered, "Dobrovolsky is still warm." They tried to revive him, but the void had already claimed them all. Even today, craters on the moon bear their names: Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Patsayev, 3 men who reached higher than anyone before them and proved a chilling truth. In space, it's not the vastness that kills you, but the smallest, simplest things.
12-year-old child tragically passed away aboard Royal Caribbean's Harmony of the Seas over the weekend after falling from an upper deck into Central Park from one of the interior balconies.
It was September 7th, 2024, and the Harmony of the Seas, one of the largest cruise ships in the world, was alive with music. More than 7,000 passengers were on board. Among them was the Davis family from Michigan, Justin and Audra and their 3 children, Amelia, Susanna, and their youngest son, Pearson, known simply as Piers. He was 12 years old, just weeks away from turning 13. Piers had spent the cruise making friends, laughing in the ship's teen club and exploring every corner of the floating city with wide-eyed wonder. To anyone who saw the Davises, they were the picture of a happy family. One couple, Becky and Gavin Potter, later said they had been struck by how kind, warm, and attentive Justin and Audra were with their kids. But on the final night, just hours before the ship was set to return home, paradise turned into tragedy. Piers fell from the balcony of his family's cabin on the 13th floor. He dropped 5 stories into Central Park, the massive open-air courtyard at the heart of the ship. A place that just moments earlier had been filled with music, chatter, and the buzz of passengers savoring their last night at sea. Some witnesses said they saw children playing near the railing. The deck was slick with rain from earlier that evening. Others said there may have been chairs positioned too close to the edge. Krista Schoolfield, a passenger watching from above, said she saw it happen with her own eyes. She couldn't be sure if Piers had been climbing, leaning, or simply caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, but she saw him fall. The ship's emergency system activated instantly. A voice rang out over the intercom. Crew members sprinted into Central Park, where a crowd of horrified passengers stood frozen in shock. Medical teams worked desperately to save him, but it was too late. Piers was gone before the Harmony of the Seas reached the Texas coast. When the ship finally docked in Galveston, the mood was nothing like the one that had filled it a week earlier. Federal officers boarded, and the FBI took control of the investigation, working with the Coast Guard, Customs, and Royal Caribbean. Every detail was scrutinized: how close the chairs had been to the railings, whether safety protocols had been followed, and why no one intervened before tragedy struck. But the answers weren't clear. Even now, they still aren't. Back in Michigan, Audra Davis shared a message that tore through social media. "The thing every parent hopes and prays does not happen to them. It happened to me. It happened to us." There were no words to describe the pain, only gratitude for those who had reached out. Her co-workers started a small fundraiser to help the family, hoping to raise $7,000. Within days, it surged to nearly $30,000 as friends, strangers, and colleagues rallied around them. His father, Justin, a screenwriter who had worked on shows like The Amazing Race and Pretty Wicked, and his mother, Audra, a manager at Whirlpool, now faced the unimaginable: life without their youngest child. What exactly happened in those final moments is still a mystery. Was it an accident, a slip on the wet deck, a preventable oversight? No one knows for certain.
The 18-year-old man who fell from a light pole during the Eagle celebration has died. Tyler Sabapathy had been on life support since Sunday when he fell at 15th and Market Streets in Center City.
January 26, 2025, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The streets of Center City pulsed with chaos and joy as thousands of Eagles fans flooded the night, their voices echoing against glass towers, fireworks bursting like cannons in the winter sky, green smoke, chants of "Fly, Eagles, fly," and wall-to-wall people turned downtown into a sea of frenzy. Among the revelers was 18-year-old Tyler Sabapathy, a freshman at Temple University. Not just another face in the crowd, Tyler was a decorated gymnast, a prodigy who had collected more than 120 medals in competition. His friends described him as fearless, relentless, and full of promise. That night, caught in the electric storm of victory, he looked like every bit the young champion he was. At the corner of 15th and Market, adrenaline surged. Tyler spotted the light pole, slick with condensation, already swarmed by fans daring each other to climb. To most, it was dangerous. To Tyler, it was instinct. Years of training, balance, and aerial control made him believe he could handle it. Cheers erupted as he scaled higher, his gymnast's body pulling against the steel, legs hooking, arms steady. For a moment, the pole became his apparatus, the crowd his audience, but celebration has a cruel way of turning. A slip so fast, so merciless, sent him crashing down. The roar of the crowd twisted into screams as Tyler's body twisted midair, then struck the unforgiving concrete below. He landed hard on his back, the whiplash of his skull against pavement echoing louder than any firework. People rushed toward him in shock, the night's joy collapsing into horror. Paramedics carved through the chaos, sirens splitting the celebration as they raced him to Jefferson Hospital. Doctors worked frantically. For 2 days, his family and teammates held on, praying over every machine that kept him alive. But the trauma was too severe. His brain injuries left no room for recovery. On January 28th, Tyler Sabapathy slipped away, just 18 years old. Temple University's president tried to put the unthinkable into words. The loss of a promising 18-year-old man like Tyler is both tragic and traumatic. There are no words that can make sense of it. Tyler wasn't just thriving academically in exercise and sports science. He was admired for his self-discipline, for the way he pushed beyond limits in everything he did. His professors saw a future leader. His teammates remembered his grit, his laughter, his unmatched work ethic. His family remembered the boy who had left Toronto full of dreams, only to never return. Video from that night still lingers online. Revelers climbing poles, fireworks cutting across the skyline, strangers cheering as the city drowned in celebration. But for those who knew Tyler, the footage is unbearable. Because that night, the victory Philadelphia celebrated became the night one young gymnast fell for the last time. A boy who once seemed untouchable in the air, grounded forever by one slip.
All of the teens died from their injuries. An OHP report says the driver was 16 years old. As for the passengers, 2 of them were 17, and the other 3 only 15.
It was March 22nd, 2022 in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, a town of just over 3,000 people where everyone knows everyone. That afternoon, 6 teenage girls, Gracie Machado, Brooklyn Triplett, Austin Holt, Madison Robertson, Addison Gratz, and Memory Wilson piled into a small 2015 Chevy Spark during their lunch break. They were close friends, full of laughter, packed together into that little car, heading out for what should have been an ordinary, carefree ride. But they never came back. Shortly after noon, their car approached a spot locals simply called the Y, a Y-shaped intersection where State Highway 22 meets US 377. It's a confusing, dangerous stretch of road with a sharp curve and poor visibility. People had warned about it for years. That day, the warnings would come tragically true. The Chevy Spark came to a stop at the sign, then began to pull out onto US 377. At that exact moment, a massive rock-hauling semi barreled down the highway. Behind the wheel was Valandon Burton, a 51-year-old grandfather and volunteer firefighter. There was no time, no chance. The truck slammed into the side of the small car, crushing it and pushing it nearly 300 feet down the road. The force of the impact was devastating. The Chevy Spark, designed for 4, had 6 inside. Only 2 of them, the front seat passengers, wore seatbelts. When first responders arrived, the scene was heartbreaking. The car was torn apart, barely recognizable. The bright pink steering wheel cover was still visible amid the twisted wreckage, a gut-wrenching reminder of how young they were. 4 of the girls, including the 16-year-old driver, died at the scene. The other 2 clung to life for a few moments longer but passed away shortly after reaching the hospital. All of them gone. Just like that, they were between 15 and 17 years old, with dreams and futures that would never be. Gracie Machado, her sister, later shared a photo of the 2 hugging, posting nothing but a broken heart emoji. Brooklyn Triplett, the cheerleader, the softball player, the loyal friend who always had your back. Austin Holt, bright, spirited, a member of Future Farmers of America who loved showing her prize hogs. Madison Robertson, a beautiful soul, her family called her, full of kindness. Addison Gratz, AJ, adored by her grandfather, who said a piece of his heart was gone forever. Memory Wilson, a young mother who somehow always found time for her little girl, no matter how busy life got. The truck driver, who had been wearing his seatbelt, survived without injury. He hadn't done anything wrong. No charges were filed. The investigation continued, but in truth, there wasn't much mystery, just unbearable sorrow. Experts pointed to familiar dangers: too many passengers, too few seatbelts. Research shows that the risk of a deadly crash skyrockets with each underage passenger in the car. And in Oklahoma, backseat passengers over 7 don't even have to wear a seatbelt. Maybe if they had, Maybe if the laws were stricter, maybe. Tributes flooded social media, photos, memories, prayers. But amid the love, there were cruel comments too. People judging, pointing fingers about the seatbelts, about choices no one could take back. The families, already shattered, now forced to defend the girls they lost.
What started as a family cruise to celebrate an anniversary ended in a murder investigation. A husband charged with killing his wife while their children were nearby.
It was July 25th, 2017. The Emerald Princess, a towering luxury cruise ship, drifted through the icy waters of Alaska. On board were Kenneth and Christy Manzanares from Utah, celebrating their 18th wedding anniversary. Alongside them were their 3 daughters and extended family. A trip meant to mark nearly 2 decades of love and togetherness. But beneath the surface of smiles and scenic views, something was unraveling. Their cabin, D726, looked ordinary. But behind its door, tension had been simmering. Christy, 39, was known for her warmth and devotion to her kids. She'd hoped the trip might bring peace. Instead, it revealed how broken things had become. That night, Christy told Kenneth she wanted a divorce. She asked him to leave the ship at the next port. Kenneth told the girls to go to the next cabin. They obeyed, until they heard their mother scream. They ran to the balcony and saw Kenneth on top of Christy, beating her. He didn't stop, not even when the blood came. Her brother burst in, finding Kenneth dragging Christy toward the balcony. He stopped him just in time. Security arrived. Medics tried to save Christy, but the trauma to her head and face was fatal. Kenneth stood there, blood-covered and blank. One passenger recalled a barefoot girl screaming down the hallway. Some thought it was part of the night's murder mystery dinner. It wasn't. Kenneth was arrested when the ship docked. He first pleaded not guilty, then took a plea deal. He claimed Christy laughed at him and he snapped. But prosecutors pointed to a pattern: past outbursts, property damage, restraint. His lawyers cited brain injuries, bipolar disorder, and a mix of alcohol and meds. Judge Timothy Burgess called the act senseless and tragic, especially with the children so close. Kenneth got 30 years in federal prison, plus 5 more of supervised release. No parole, but he never served it. Months later, he was found unresponsive in his Juneau jail cell. Paramedics couldn't revive him. He was 43. No foul play was suspected, and the cause of death was never disclosed. The Emerald Princess continued sailing. Cabin D726 was cleaned and reused. But for Christy's family, the ship became a ghost. The daughters lost both parents, one to violence, the other to a jail cell and a silent death. It was just past 1 a.m. on a warm November night in Tucson, Arizona. Inside 10's show club, the music was loud, the lights were low, and people were unwinding, some laughing, some drinking, some lost in the haze of the night. No one suspected that within seconds, everything would shatter. Outside in the parking lot, a white 4-door sedan with black wheels and a busted tail light pulled in quietly, unnoticed. The passenger door creaked open. A man stepped out, dressed in gray sweatpants, a green striped shirt, a beanie pulled low over his head, and blue latex gloves on his hands. He was calm, purposeful, and he was carrying a rifle. Surveillance footage later confirmed what witnesses barely had time to register. The man walked straight into the club. No words, no hesitation. He raised the gun and opened fire. Panic erupted. Glass shattered. People screamed and dove for cover. In the chaos, 37-year-old Daniel Antonio Ortiz was struck down. His body collapsed to the floor as the shooter turned and ran, vanishing back into the night just as quickly as he came. The car sped off, swallowed by the darkness. Daniel was rushed to a hospital, but the damage was done. He didn't make it. The city woke up to a nightmare, another man dead. Another act of violence in a place people go to forget their worries. The killer's face was hidden, his identity unknown. For days, all police had was grainy video, a few desperate leads, and a haunting silence. But behind the scenes, investigators worked tirelessly. They traced the vehicle, old, worn, likely late 90s or early 2000s, to a house on East Sunland Vista. Surveillance had done its job. Eventually, a name surfaced: Stanley Jerome Calvin. At first, the charges were serious first-degree murder. But as months turned into years, the case twisted. Deals were made. In August 2023, Calvin pleaded guilty not to murder, but to manslaughter. Then came the shock. On a Thursday in late September, nearly 3 years after Daniel Ortiz was gunned down in cold blood, Calvin stood in court and was sentenced to 5 years probation and 100 hours of community service. By the next morning, he was free and released from jail, just like that. The same system that once held him for murder now let him walk. no longer behind bars. Even the property police had seized during the investigation was returned. Daniel Ortiz, meanwhile, remains just a memory, a man who walked into a club that night and never walked out. His family never got the justice they hoped for. The community never got the closure they needed. A club full of witnesses, a video showing a man with a rifle, a body on the floor, and still it ended in probation. In a world where the line between justice and compromise grows thinner by the day, this story serves as a grim reminder. Even when everything is caught on camera, even when someone dies in front of a crowd, the truth doesn't always lead to justice. Sometimes it just leaves you with questions and silence.
Gunmen have opened fire on a notorious South Melbourne strip club. It's the third time the venue has been targeted in recent months.
December 2016, Melbourne, Australia. 29-year-old Stacey Tierney's life ended in a way that still haunts those who knew her, under a cloud of mystery, neglect, and unanswered questions. Originally from Withington, Manchester, Stacey had traveled halfway across the world, chasing a dream. Her boyfriend had secured an engineering job in Victoria, and she saw this as a chance to build a future, one she hoped would lead to nursing studies. To support herself while waiting for her study visa, she took a job at Dreams Gentlemen's Club. It wasn't a job she liked, but Stacey confided in friends it was a stepping stone. Necessary, temporary, a way to save money for what really mattered. On the night of December 17th, Stacey clocked in at 8:20 p.m., ready to work her usual shift. She stayed late, like always, until the club closed to customers at 4 a.m. But then, the night didn't end. Instead, a staff party began in the manager's office, where Stacey and some colleagues gathered after hours. It was here, in that dimly lit room, that the last chapter of Stacey's life began. Two men, Joseph Barr and Thomas Massoon, were with her that night. But what happened in those early hours remains a dark puzzle, tangled in conflicting stories and silence. At some point, Stacey lost consciousness. Her body betrayed her, filled with a deadly cocktail of stimulants and depressants. How she ended up with those substances in her system, who gave them to her, and why no one stepped in remain chilling mysteries. Between 5:30 and 6 a.m., Joseph Barr sent a message to the bar manager. He said Stacey was unresponsive and that he didn't know what to do, but no one called for help. No one came to her aid. Time slipped by mercilessly. It wasn't until more than 30 hours later, on December 19th, that police and paramedics finally arrived. By then, it was too late. They found Stacey's lifeless body, partially clothed, slumped on a sofa in the manager's office. Joseph Barr and Thomas Massoon were still there. Paramedics overheard one man say to the other, "I think we're all right here." Those words hung in the air like a dark confession, an eerie admission that they knew something was wrong, but chose to stay silent. The office had been cleaned before police arrived, erasing any chance of a clear scene. CCTV footage was non-existent, and the conflicting accounts from those present only deepened the fog surrounding Stacey's final hours. The coroner's verdict was open. Drug toxicity was the cause of death, but the truth behind those fatal hours remained shrouded in shadows. Stacey's family was left devastated, grappling not only with grief, but with a deep sense of injustice. Her mother, Michelle Frost, spoke out with heartbreak, condemning the inhumanity her daughter faced when she needed help most. In the aftermath, some measure of accountability surfaced. The club's owner, Salvatore Aparo, was fined £16,000. The Victorian Gambling and Casino Control Commission took disciplinary action, and Stephen Kiraku, the club's general manager at the time, was banned from managing licensed premises for a year.
There's new information in the death of a former dean at UC San Diego. There are reports that Thomas McAfee was trampled by an elephant while on a safari in Tanzania.
It was August 31st, 2013 in northern Tanzania. Dr. Thomas McAfee, a 58-year-old physician from the United States, had just stepped down as the Dean of Clinical Affairs at UC San Diego's Health Sciences. and was days away from becoming CEO of the Keck Medicine of USC Medical Foundation. Years of leadership, dedication, and sacrifice had brought him here. McAfee knew Africa well. Friends and colleagues described him as careful, experienced, respectful of the land and the animals that roamed it. He was staying near Tarangire National Park, an area famous for its massive herds of elephants. Unlike inside the park, where tourists remained safely in vehicles, private reserves nearby allowed walking safaris. And on that day, McAfee joined 2 other Americans for a guided trek on foot. No one knows for certain if the group had an armed guide or if all the proper safety rules were followed. What is certain is that this single decision to step into the wild on foot would cost him his life. The path was thick with brush, the kind of terrain where sight lines vanish quickly. Then, out of nowhere, the group stumbled upon a herd of elephants, 50 of them, towering and restless. Anyone who has seen one up close knows their power. 15,000 pounds of muscle, instinct, and unpredictability. And when startled, elephants react fast. The guide's command was immediate. Run. The 3 tourists fled, crashing through the brush. But in the chaos, McAfee stumbled, and in that instant, one elephant broke from the herd and charged. The ground shook beneath its weight, and before anyone could intervene, it trampled him. The impact left devastating internal injuries. Help was called, and he was rushed to a small local clinic, but the damage was too great. Within hours, a man who had devoted his life to saving others could not be saved himself. His death left behind more questions than answers. Tarangire River Camp continued to advertise walking safaris, selling them as an intimate way to connect with nature. After McAfee's death, voices in the industry began to split. Some, like veteran safari operator Jim Heck, insisted he had warned clients for years to avoid such tours, especially in areas where elephants were showing heightened stress from human activity. He even posted a blog afterward titled, "Don't Walk on Safari," a grim reminder of what he believed was negligence. Others defended the practice, pointing out that thousands of walking safaris happen every year without incident. But for McAfee's colleagues and family, the arguments meant little. His body was taken to Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, and U.S. officials worked to bring him home. At UC San Diego, where he had worked for more than a decade, his death sent shockwaves. His sister confirmed to the media that Thomas was fully aware of the risks, but had chosen the trip because of his lifelong love for nature and his unwavering support of conservation. It wasn't recklessness, it was passion, a belief that to truly respect life, you had to step into it, not just watch it from behind glass, but that passion cost him everything. He was only 23, but already a national hero. Anton Malayge had tasted Olympic glory, winning bronze in Amsterdam just 2 years earlier, and now stood poised to cement his place among the world's best. But in the summer of 1930, on a rainy day in Luxembourg, everything unraveled, quietly, fatally, and without warning. What was meant to be another step in a celebrated career turned into one of the darkest moments in gymnastics history. The World Championships that year, still known then as the International Tournament, had already begun under a cloud of uncertainty. Literally, rain had poured across Luxembourg, forcing organizers to relocate the competition from a proper stadium to a makeshift gym inside a nearby school. The decision was rushed, the setup wasn't ready, and the equipment fatally inadequate. But the show went on. Anton Malay, known affectionately as Tone, stepped onto the rings, an event he had trained for relentlessly, ever since joining the Sokol movement as a teenager. His form was sharp, his rhythm strong, but as he dismounted from the rings, something went wrong. The landing mat beneath him, thin, poorly secured, far below competition standards, did nothing to absorb the impact. He collapsed in agony. No cameras, no medics rushing in with stretchers, just confusion, stunned silence, and then frantic whispers. He was taken to a local hospital in Luxembourg, but it was clear from the beginning this wasn't just a bad fall. It was his spine. The damage was irreversible. He lingered through the night, and on July 15th, 1930, Anton Malayge died. Even in the face of that unimaginable loss, the competition continued. The Yugoslavian team, stunned and grieving, chose to compete anyway. Their teammate Josip Primožić went on to win the all-around. The team took third place, but the celebration was muted. What do medals mean when one of your own never made it back? It wasn't just bad luck. Fellow gymnast Edvard Antosevic, who had stood beside Mala on that 1928 Olympic podium, later spoke out. He blamed the rushed relocation, blamed the poor safety, blamed the negligence. After all, 2 Yugoslav athletes had fallen that day. Leon Stukelj slipped from the high bar and had to withdraw, but Anton never got the chance to recover. An investigation later confirmed the worst. The gym floor had been covered in thin, unsuitable mats. There had been no proper preparation, no margin for error. And in this sport, there is no margin for error. Back home in Ljubljana, the sorrow was overwhelming. His body arrived by train on July 18th. Tabor Hall, the heart of the Slovenian Sokol movement, became a shrine. More than 10,000 people came to say goodbye. Mourners lined the streets. His casket passed through Skofja Loka and onto Bohinjska Bistrica, where he was buried beneath the mountain skies of his childhood. His grave bears a bronze bust sculpted by Lojza Dolinar, a reminder that even legends fall, but some leave behind more than medals. Since 1970, an annual memorial competition has been held in his name. Streets in Ljubljana and Bohinjska Bistrica still carry his legacy. Anton Malej didn't die in war. He didn't die in battle. He died doing what he loved, in a competition that should have protected him. It was April 28, 2023, a warm night in Folly Beach, South Carolina. Samantha Miller, 34, had just married the love of her life, Arik Hutchinson. Their wedding had been everything they dreamed. Simple, joyful, unforgettable. After the reception, they climbed into a golf cart to ride into their new life. Samantha, still in her wedding dress, turned to Arik and smiled. "I don't want the night to end," she said, but it was about to. Nearby, Jaime Komorowski, 25, was getting into her car after spending the day drinking. Witnesses saw her stumbling, slurring, clearly drunk. No one stopped her, not friends, not bartenders. Her blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. But she drove anyway. She was going 65 in a 25 zone when she crashed into the golf cart. The impact was devastating. Arik was thrown, suffering brain trauma, shattered bones, and a broken heart. Samantha died instantly. One moment she was glowing in her wedding dress, the next, gone. When police arrived, Komorowski refused a sobriety test. She insisted she'd done nothing wrong, but the evidence told the truth. Her toxicology report made it undeniable. She should never have been behind the wheel. While Komorowski was taken to jail, Arik lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by tubes and monitors. Doctors worked to repair his body, but nothing could touch the damage done to his soul. He had to be told that the woman he had just vowed to spend forever with was already gone. At her funeral, he wore a suit over his hospital gown. The casts and bruises didn't hurt nearly as much as knowing Samantha would never walk through their front door again. In court, Arik barely managed to speak. "I wish I'd seen it coming," he said through tears. "I would have jumped off the golf cart so you would only have run me over." His voice wasn't angry. It was hollowed out by grief. Komorowski pleaded guilty to DUI resulting in death and reckless homicide. She apologized in court and promised to spend her life helping others with addiction. But Samantha's family didn't want words. They wanted Samantha. Her mother, Lisa Miller, faced Komorowski and said, "She didn't just take my child, she took all of us." 2 of Arik's relatives who had been riding with them were also seriously injured. One crash had shattered multiple lives. Komorowski was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Her lawyers appealed, arguing that media attention influenced the verdict. The court disagreed. This wasn't about headlines. It was about a life cut short on the happiest night of all. Arik filed a lawsuit, not only against Komorowski, but also the bars that kept serving her. He wanted to hold them accountable for ignoring the signs. This wasn't revenge. It was a plea for change, so no one else would have to bury a bride before the honeymoon. Samantha's story lingers. A woman full of joy and promise, taken in seconds by someone else's recklessness. It's a brutal reminder. Drunk driving doesn't just ruin lives, it ends them. There's a silence now where laughter used to be. A ring that won't be worn, a dress that will never be passed down. Arik still speaks out, still fights, because Samantha deserves more than memories. She deserves to be a wake-up call. It was a Sunday night in March 2019 in Odessa, Ukraine. 33-year-old Victoria Kravchenko was sitting in the passenger seat of a BMW X6 next to 22-year-old Shamil Gav as the car raced through the streets. Witnesses said they were speeding alongside a Porsche, engines roaring, chasing adrenaline. What neither of them knew was that within minutes this ride would end in flames. Victoria wasn't just anyone. She was a mother of 2, a daughter and a businesswoman. She carried with her a story that connected the quiet streets of Odessa to the glamour of Hollywood. Her father, Valery Kravchenko, was once stunned by a revelation that linked their family tree to none other than Sylvester Stallone. It began decades earlier when Stallone's mother, Jackie, began digging into her family's roots in the Soviet Union. With help from Mikhail Gorbachev himself, the KGB traced her grandmother's line back to Odessa. The trail led straight to Valery's family, proving that the Kravchenkos and Stallones were distant cousins. Jackie flew to Odessa, where she met Valery face to face. He thought it was a joke, until she looked him in the eye and said, "Hello, Valerie, how are you? It looks like you are the only living relation of our family." Back then, Valerie was breaking barriers, opening the first privately owned gas station in the Soviet Union. He later introduced Jackie to his daughter, Victoria. She was young, full of energy, and had no idea how strange and extraordinary that meeting really was. Years later, Victoria recalled how surreal it felt to discover a bloodline connecting her to one of Hollywood's biggest icons. She laughed about how nobody believed her at first, until she explained how Jackie Stallone had sat with her like a girlfriend, offering travel tips, cracking jokes, and radiating energy even at her age. She remembered thinking her father and Sylvester shared the same piercing eyes. By 2019, Victoria had built a life of her own. She was a successful businesswoman, working in her father's companies, raising her children, and carrying herself with the quiet confidence of someone proud of her roots. But that March night, all of it ended in seconds. As the BMW tore through the streets, it slammed into a parked Hyundai Sonata. The impact sent the car spinning, metal screaming as it lost control. Then came the moment no one could take back. The BMW smashed into a utility pole carrying high-voltage wires. In an instant, the night lit up with fire. The car exploded, flames swallowed the vehicle, and Victoria and Shamil were trapped inside. There was no escape. By the time emergency crews arrived, the scene was already beyond saving. All that was left was a blazing wreck, the smell of smoke heavy in the air, and 2 lives cut short. Security cameras captured the exact moment the car spun out of control, a few seconds that replayed over and over as investigators reviewed the footage. A thrill ride turned to silence. It was just after 3:30 a.m. on a quiet January night in 2016 when the silence of a Pasadena, Texas neighborhood was shattered by the violent sound of metal crushing against pavement. Moments earlier, 2 men had climbed into a black 2012 Chevy Silverado, leaving behind the flashing lights and pulsing music of a local strip club. One of them would never make it home. 26-year-old Brian Baker was behind the wheel. He was drunk, though no one knew just how drunk until it was far too late. Riding in the passenger seat was Dustin Jackson, a man Baker claimed he had only just met that night. According to him, he was simply offering Dustin a ride to his hotel. But that act of kindness, if that's truly what it was, ended in tragedy. Police say Baker was flying down the street near Vista Road and Broadmoor Street, speeding recklessly into a turn that would prove fatal. The truck careened out of control and slammed into the edge of a quiet residential neighborhood, just feet from rows of townhomes where people slept unaware of the horror unfolding outside. One nearby resident, jolted awake by the crash, ran outside and saw the aftermath: twisted metal, shattered glass, and Baker desperately trying to pull Dustin from the wreckage. The scene was frantic, chaotic, and by then, it was already too late. Dustin Jackson was dead. When officers arrived, they could smell the alcohol on Baker's breath before he even spoke. He failed the sobriety test on the spot. Later, at the hospital where he was flown via life flight for serious injuries, including damage to his back, he admitted to having had as many as 7 drinks that night. A blood test confirmed it. His blood alcohol level was dangerously high. This wasn't a minor mistake. This was intoxication manslaughter. For the first time since the crash, Brian Baker appeared in court, his body still healing, but his future suddenly shattered. His bail was set at $100,000. The judge barred him from drinking, from stepping foot in another bar. He'd need to install an interlock system in his vehicle and blow into a breathalyzer every day at home. These are the consequences for what was already done. But for Dustin Jackson's family, there is no undoing this. A man lost his life that night after leaving what was supposed to be just another club, just another night. No one plans for their final moments. No one expects that a simple ride home with a stranger could be the last ride they ever take. And yet, it happens again and again. Because it only takes one bad decision, one turn too fast, one drink too many, and someone's entire world comes crashing down. It was just another summer day at the famed gymnastics school in Deva. Inside the gym, 12-year-old Alexandra Hucci was training quietly, alone, working through a wrist injury that had kept her from full routines. She was small, just 55 pounds, but already carried the weight of Romania's storied gymnastics legacy on her tiny shoulders. Everyone said she had that special spark, and she did, until the moment she didn't. That morning, nothing seemed out of place. Alexandra had been practicing in the pit, focused, determined. Then, without warning, she walked over to her coach, Liliana Kozma, and softly said she needed to go to the restroom. Minutes later, she returned pale, shaken, and whispered that she couldn't continue. She had just thrown up. Her coach didn't hesitate. They went straight to the school doctor. By then, something had already gone terribly wrong. The school's physician examined her and called an ambulance. Alexandra was still conscious when they loaded her in, at least that's what the doctor said, but the nurse who rode with her told a different story. She was already in a coma when we arrived, the nurse said later, her voice tight with disbelief. We asked if she had fallen, but were told no. The girl hadn't collapsed from a fall or an impact. Something inside her simply gave out. She was rushed from the pediatric hospital in Deva to the county hospital's ICU. Then, as her condition worsened, she was airlifted 43 minutes to the neurosurgery unit in Timisoara. Her tiny frame, now unconscious and unmoving, was kept alive by tubes and wires, surrounded by flowers and religious icons from strangers who had seen her on the news. Romania was watching. Night after night, her condition was broadcast across the country. Doctors worked urgently, running test after test, but their faces grew graver with each passing hour. A neurosurgeon finally confirmed what no one had suspected. It wasn't trauma. It wasn't from the gym. Alexandra had been living with a hidden congenital defect, a malformation of blood vessels deep in her brain. It had burst. A sudden brain hemorrhage, silent and swift, had robbed her of consciousness. They couldn't see the exact cause. All they knew was that her brain was flooding with blood and she had slipped into a third-degree coma. Time was slipping too. Back in her hometown of Roman, her parents didn't even know what had happened. They lived in a poor village near Faltitseni and didn't have a phone. By the time word finally reached them, their daughter had already spent hours fighting for her life. Alexandra Hucci had begun gymnastics at just 6 years old, full of raw energy and devotion. Like so many Romanian girls before her, she came from hardship and trained with quiet, relentless focus. She had recently been crowned national champion for her age group. She dreamed of following in the footsteps of her idols, the girls who had swept gold at Sydney in 2000. She talked about the Olympics constantly. I was very happy when Romania won, she said in an interview the year before, standing straight and serious between tumbling passes. I have no time for friends, but I like the gym. She was 12. For 5 days, she fought. The machines kept her breathing, but her light was slipping further away. And on August 20th, 2001, Alexandra died. She never fell. She never cried out. There was no dramatic crash, just a quiet whisper to her coach, a look in her eyes that said something wasn't right, and then nothing. Her story is still whispered in Romania, a little girl who trained with Olympic dreams and collapsed under the weight of something no one could see. No warning, no chance, just a silent defect that waited patiently for its moment.